Ling Han, you are still the original you, and I am no longer the original me, Hong Tianliang shouted loudly. His clawed hands brandished majestically, and a mysterious energy overflowed, possessing great destructive power. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself, and said, "Where do you get the confidence to think that I'm still the original me? Humph, no matter what changes you have undergone, there is only one result that you will have in front of me, and that is defeat." Hong Tianliang shouted lightly and attacked continuously. "Then let me see just how much progress you have made." Ling Han casually shot out a punch. Under the release of his power, he did not directly clash with Hong Tianliang, but rather the force of both sides was clashing. He shockingly discovered that the black energy wrapped around his opponent's hand was really powerful. When his force hit it, it was like tofu meeting a sharp blade, easily sliced apart. This kind of energy was of a higher level, just like the sword chi that had been delivered by the broken sword. It was clearly not very strong in terms of power, but its might was endless. Could humans also make use of this kind of energy? TSK, this guy's strength had really increased quite a bit. No wonder he was so confident. However, he wanted to use this to defeat him. He was thinking too much. Ling Han didn't counterattack either. He simply dragged out the battle with Hong Tianliang. He was extremely interested in this kind of energy. Outside. Big news, big news. Ling Han and Hong Tianliang have gotten into a fight. The people ranked first and second in credits are finally on opposing sides? How exciting! Who do you think will emerge victorious? If it was in the past, I would guess that it would be Ling Han, but now, I'm betting on Hong Tianliang. Why? Just because he had been specially trained by that person for a few months. Although this is a little unreasonable, I actually can't object. Everyone was discussing, but all of them were more optimistic about Hong Tianliang. That was because he was that person's younger brother, and it was that simple. Also, why is there a layer of black around Hong Tianliang's hands? Did he practice some special claw technique? I can't see clearly. It seems to be very powerful. Just look, with a light swipe on the rock was split into two. It's as if there's a peerless sword embedded in his hands. It's greatly improving his battle prowess. Now we can confirm that Ling Han is going to lose. That's right. He's been dodging all this while, and doesn't dare to face it head-on at all. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Hong Tianliang's attacks became fiercer and fiercer. He had already gotten accustomed to battle, and displayed his full strength. Aside from the fact that he didn't boil his blood and qi and use a spirit tool, it could be said that he was going all out. Ling Han still focused on roaming around and fighting, not fighting head-on with the other party. Do you think that it's fine just as long as you don't directly clash with me? Hong Tianliang sneered. He waved his clawed hand again, and shockingly, the force he delivered this time was actually mixed with a sliver of black-colored energy. It was very little and very light, but it did indeed exist. Ling Han shot out a punch, but the force that he had shot out was easily shattered by this force, which continued to blast towards him. Interesting. Ling Han threw another punch, and this time he directly parried the attack. Puff! The powerful qi hit his fist, and finally shattered. However, a small wound also appeared on Ling Han's fist, blood seeping out. This destructive power was truly terrifying. If it wasn't for the fact that Ling Han's physique was extremely tough, it was very likely that even the bones in his fist would have been shattered. How is it? Hong Tianliang asked proudly. Ling Han's interest was piqued, and he asked, "What technique is this? You expect me to tell you?" Hong Tianliang scoffed. "It's not like you're going to lose anything by telling me," Ling Han said with a smile. "All right, even if you don't answer, I can guess a little. There are two possibilities. Firstly, you have cultivated some kind of claw technique. This is the might of a claw technique. Secondly, you have some kind of cultivation technique that can extract higher-level energy to strengthen your attack." As he spoke, he kept an eye out for any change in expression on Hong Tianliang's face. Then he added, "I guess it's the second reason." Hong Tianliang's expression involuntarily changed, but he immediately revealed a confident smile. "So what if you guessed?" It's impossible to grasp it. Is that so? Ling Han asked with a smile. In this short period of time, if he had only been exchanging blows with Hong Tianliang, it was indeed impossible for him to grasp it. However, since this opportunity had been opened for him, allowing him to see a different sky, Ling Han believed that it should only be a matter of time before he grasped this kind of energy. Ling Han, hand over the essence nurturing gourd. Hong Tianliang pursued him closely. Ling Han shook his head and said, I just let you have the first few moves. Budo, you really think you're that awesome? He began to counterattack, unleashing his frequency attack. As the demonic monkey fists blasted out, they were directly stacked with 20 layers of power. Pung, pung, pung. This was earth-shattering. Hong Tianliang was naturally unafraid, and he raised his clawed hands to parry. Pung, it could be said that this was the first time that a real head-on collision had taken place between the two of them. Fist and claw collided, instantly stirring up the surrounding air, turning into a powerful hurricane. Hong Tianliang's expression changed drastically, and he involuntarily stumbled back in retreat. His face instantly flushed red, then paled, and then flushed bright red again, as if he was performing face-changing. Ling Han didn't retreat. However, there was another wound on his fist, and it was dripping blood. In that clash just now, Ling Han could be considered to have completely gained the upper hand in terms of power, but Hong Tianliang had still managed to injure Ling Han's fist with the help of the mysterious energy. However, it was only the surface, and had not damaged his bones and tendons. What? Hong Tianliang was filled with disbelief. He was clearly a second change, so how could he be so much weaker than Ling Han in terms of power? You can't have really reached the second limit of the meridian opening tier, he said in a trembling voice. Otherwise, it couldn't be explained why his cultivation level was obviously on the upper hand, yet there was such a large gap in power. You guess, Ling Han said smilingly. Hong Tianliang pulled himself together. He definitely wouldn't allow himself to fail. He charged over again, and as his clawed hands moved, the black-colored energy became even denser. With Ling Han's temper, he couldn't care less. With a wave of his fists, he clashed head-on with Hong Tianliang. Pung, pung, pung. After several dozen consecutive attacks, Hong Tianliang had no choice but to retreat. This was because even his fingers had been broken. Meanwhile, Ling Han's fists were also stained with blood. The destructive power of the black energy was indeed great. However, overall it was naturally Ling Han who had the upper hand. His fists were only bleeding, and if the battle continued, Hong Tianliang would lose his battle prowess. Outside, everyone was dumbfounded. They all thought that Ling Han had relied on a spirit tool to kill two extreme bone-tier demonic beasts. Thus, when Hong Tianliang went over, they believed that Ling Han would definitely lose. However, only after they had fought did they realize that Ling Han was actually so powerful. A considerable number of people were swayed. It was possible that Ling Han should be the one who would win. Hong Tianliang took a deep breath and adjusted a few of his finger bones. He roared loudly, and instantly, all the blood in his body boiled. Xiao, with a stomp of his feet, he charged towards Ling Han. With a wave of his clawed hand, the black-colored energy became even denser. Ling Han smiled faintly. Hong Tianliang, I have at least 3 ways to defeat you. Bullshit. Hong Tianliang couldn't help but curse. He was confident that he was already invincible in blood transformation tier. Yet, Ling Han actually said that there were 3 ways to defeat him. First, Ling Han activated shuttle steps, and his speed instantly soared to twice the speed of sound. Under such high speed, even after his blood boiled, Hong Tianhang still couldn't touch a corner of his clothes. After flying at high speed for 3 minutes, Ling Han stopped and asked, "How is it?" Hong Tianliang was rendered speechless. He had not thought that Ling Han would be able to burst out with such high speed. In fact, Ling Han could still maintain such speed. In this way, Ling Han would completely be able to survive his burst of power, causing him to have wasted his trump card. This was what he was thinking, yet his clawed hand didn't stop. Instead, it continued to slash at Ling Han. Second, Ling Han exclaimed, and also began to boil his blood and qi. greeting the incoming attack with a punch. Pang! In the clash of terrifying power, Hong Tianliang was instantly sent flying, his fingers twisted. In the first place, my strength has already crushed you. Ling Han's mystical power was even stronger than Hong Tianliang's, and under the boiling of his blood and qi, his mystical power had increased threefold, further enlarging the gap in power between him and Hong Tianliang. Thus, if Hong Tianliang fought him head-on, he would only be seeking his own suffering, or even seeking his own demise. Pang! Hong Tianliang crashed to the ground, feeling his confidence also fall to rock bottom, shattering into pieces. He was confident that he had cultivated a special technique that could sweep aside all blood transformation tier elites, but in front of Ling Han, the seemingly invincible technique couldn't even withstand a single blow. Thirdly, I think I still have to reserve it. There's no need to use it on you, Ling Han said calmly. The third method was naturally spiritual power. The 9 flying swords were now Ling Han's trump card, capable of killing even extreme bone tier elites, what more a second change blood transformation tier. Of course, strictly speaking, he still had a 4th trump card, and that was formation technique. In future, it would become Ling Han's 2nd trump card, and he would not reveal it now. Hong Tianliang laughed tragically. He had never thought that he had suffered so much in the last few months, and almost died a few times, which allowed his abilities to improve greatly, but who would have thought that he was still inferior to Ling Han? He didn't care what Ling Han's third method was. As he saw it, it should be a spirit tool. Being able to kill extreme bone tier elites, it was naturally capable of suppressing him. Actually, he also had a powerful spirit tool, but if he defeated Ling Han with the help of a spirit tool, it was impossible for him to recover his confidence. Moreover, Ling Han also had a spirit tool, so it wasn't certain that he would win either. He had lost and lost again. Hong Tianliang got up and walked back the way he came, his figure very bleak. Ling Han sighed. He really wanted to advise everyone not to treat him as a target to be surpassed and compared. Otherwise, they would only be beaten bloody and battered. And in the outside world, similar exclamations of surprise arose. This result was really beyond everyone's expectations. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually be so powerful? He had easily defeated Hong Tianliang. As expected of the second Hong Tianbu. Do you guys think that Ling Han would be able to break through to the position of number 1 prodigy that Hong Tianbu holds in the future? This is absolutely impossible. Hong Tianbu is a freakish prodigy who can suppress the heavens. There is only one such prodigy in this world. That's true. Ling Han has only defeated Hong Tianliang. He should still be too far away from that person. To say nothing else, that person is already in the 3rd level of extreme bone tier. It's said that his battle prowess is comparable to inscription tier. What kind of concept is that? If he really encountered Hong Tianbu, he would be able to crush Ling Han with a single finger. Everyone reached a consensus, and that was there was absolutely no way that Ling Han would be able to match Hong Tianbu. He wouldn't even be qualified to compare to the latter. Ling Han found a blind spot in the surveillance and entered into the essence nurturing gourd. He had a good sleep, and while he was at it, absorbed the energy inside the gourd, improving his body in all aspects, especially spiritual power, which Ling Han now had high hopes for. A night passed, and Ling Han exited the gourd. He didn't cultivate. His mystical power had already reached the pinnacle of first change. All he needed to do now was stabilize his cultivation level, and there was no further room for improvement. He continued to search for extreme bone tier demonic beasts. Although he was currently ranked 1st, without a continuous increase in credits, he would still be caught up by others. Half a day later, he found the 3rd extreme bone tier great beast. This was a goat, but it had a single black horn. Its whole body was covered with long silver fur, and it looked very majestic. Ling Han exchanged blows with it, yet he was defeated. He didn't even have the chance to summon his flying sword before fleeing in a sorry state. He even boiled his blood and qi. The goat chased for a good few minutes, and only then did it give up, turned around and went back the way it came. Fuck, this goat was at least a 3rd extreme. It was too powerful. That black bear was a 2nd extreme, and was already incredibly hard to kill. A 3rd extreme would definitely be even harder to kill. Just leave like that? Ling Han shook his head. He had made a decision. He would break through to second change. After advancing into the second change, his strength would definitely increase. The changes to his mystical power and physical power would be very small. He had only unlocked the upper limit for further improvement, but his spiritual power would increase explosively. Come on then. After these few battles, Ling Han also felt that his cultivation level was stable enough. He found a blind spot in the surveillance, entered into the essence nurturing gourd, and began to break through to the second change. This was the elevation of the level of being. Ling Han discovered that there seemed to be countless chains in his body, and the elevation of his cultivation level tore through these chains, thereby achieving the leap in the level of being. He found a chain and began to charge. Very soon, this chain was torn apart, but this was still not enough to complete the second change. Thus, he continued to tear off another chain. Chong, chong, chong. Loud sounds rang out from within his body, and the chains fell off, releasing his life energy, which rushed towards a higher level. In this process, his life force was also being expended rapidly. Ling Han hurriedly ingested the vermilion fruit to strengthen his life force, so he could maintain this kind of expenditure. The chains continued to break free, and his level of being also continued to leap. Meanwhile, the number of vermilion fruits also continued to decrease. When Ling Han ingested 7 vermilion fruits, his momentum finally slowed down. Second change. Next, he would have to accumulate power for a very long time before he could unleash a burst of power and continue to improve his level of being. In terms of power, Ling Han's power had improved slightly. This was only unlocking the upper limit, but his spiritual power had improved greatly. This was closely related to his level of being. He exited the gourd and began to experiment. The flying sword shot out at an incredibly fast speed. 3.5 times the speed of sound. Ling Han's eyes lit up. Then he threw it out with his hand again. Spiritual power accelerated it, and this time it reached 4.5 times the speed of sound. Although its speed had only increased by 0.5 times the speed of sound, it was already very, very difficult to increase it by a dozen% or so on the basis of such high speed. Let's battle. Ling Han charged back in excitement. This time, he was definitely going to defeat that goat and roast it whole. In the outside world, everyone was still engaged in heated discussions about how Ling Han had been chased into fleeing by that third extreme goat yesterday. They hadn't seen any sign of Ling Han for almost a day. This guy couldn't have been severely injured, right? Hong Tianliang was no longer in the mood to compete, and his credits had never changed. He had even fallen to 5th place, and the second place holder was only a few digits away from Ling Han. As long as he killed another demonic beast, he would be able to completely surpass Ling Han. Could it be that both the top two were going to withdraw from the stage in a dramatic manner? Right at this moment, everyone saw Ling Han appear on the screen again. Here he is again. This guy looks a little different. Hiss. Look at his qi and blood. Everyone shockingly discovered that Ling Han's qi and blood was extremely unstable. Furthermore, there was black in the purple, and it was obvious that he had just broken through. Heavens! He has broken through to second change. Someone finally discovered. What, has this guy gone mad? He actually broke through here. To forcefully break through like this, to say nothing of the dangerous environment here, how could he possibly bring treasured fruits to maintain vitality with him? Isn't that just courting death? This guy is really putting his life on the line. Looking at the path he is taking, he clearly wants to find that third extreme demonic goat again. In order to win, this guy doesn't even care about his life. What's the point of doing this? If one's foundations are damaged, would there still be any future to speak of? After all, he's a person who came from the rurals. For the sake of immediate benefits, he neglected the big picture, so it's actually understandable. Forget it. There is no need to pay attention to this person in the future. There's already no future to speak of. Soon, he will be surpassed by others. To say nothing of being the second Hong Tianbu, he's not worthy at all. Though that was what they said, they were still watching as Ling Han challenged that demonic goat. Ling Han used another mysterious spirit tool. I can't see clearly at all. I can only see a flash of light. The demonic goat has been shot in a vital point. It has been hit again. Heavens! That demonic goat has fallen. Everyone wanted to grab their heads and exclaim in shock. You advanced a minor level in cultivation level, and even increased the upper limit of beating an extreme bone tier by a whole level? How could such a thing happen? It should be known that when an extreme bone tier elite increased their cultivation level by a minor level, how could the increase in battle prowess from this compare to the increase in battle prowess obtained when a blood transformation tier advances by a minor level? However, Ling Han overturned everyone's understanding and created a miracle. I have to say, though this brat's future is already bleak, he can still possess the battle prowess of extreme bone tier. No matter what, he can still be considered a somebody in the future. Someone mused ruefully. Heh! In the imperial capital, what are extreme bone tier elites worth? Someone immediately scoffed. In a short while, Ling Han's credits refreshed, adding another 500 points all of a sudden. There was only less than half a day left until the deadline of 3 days. He was sure that no matter how hard the second-place holder tried, he would not be able to obtain 500 credits. Thus, the outcome was already decided. On the other side, Ling Han also began to clean up the mess. He had just broken through, and the upper limit of his physical power had also been lifted. He just happened to need this kind of high-energy meat to nourish himself. Roasted whole lamb. This demonic goat was very big, and was comparable to the size of a fierce tiger. Roasting it was very time-consuming, and Ling Han couldn't help but reminisce about the time when he was still in the Genesis world, when he could easily ignite divine flames with a casual press of his hand. Roasting a goat was a piece of cake. After 2 hours, this demonic goat was finally roasted, its fragrance wafting in all directions. Ling Han's appetite was stirred, and he immediately began wolfing down the food. His appetite was shockingly huge now. After eating madly for half an hour, only a small half of this demonic goat was left. Finding a blind spot in the surveillance, Ling Han put away the remaining mutton, then began to rush back. He was definitely going to get first place, so he could naturally go back the way he came. However, halfway there, the sun just happened to rise, so he naturally stopped and began to cultivate first. He did not absorb a sliver of purple chi. Looks like merely cultivating in the wilderness and mountains was not enough. He still had to go to specific places. Half an hour later, he continued on his way. Before he had even walked out of the hunting grounds, the 3-day deadline had already arrived. The optical computer sent out a notification, informing everyone that the hunt had already ended. The credits leaderboard was locked in, and no matter how much they hunted, they would not be able to obtain an increase in marks. Ling Han walked all the way out and gradually saw some people. They were all heading towards the exit. Ling Han! Xianxia Dingwa leaped over and punched Ling Han in the chest, saying, "Brat, you're truly hiding your strength. You managed to get first place without making a sound." Ling Han smiled faintly. "I was just lucky. Luck your head. Killing 3 extreme bone tier demonic beasts is called luck." Xianxia Dingwa mocked. "Although I also have a spirit tool, it can only rival first extreme at most. It's difficult to suppress one, let alone kill it. I'm cheering for you, work hard." Ling Han patted his shoulder. "You're blatantly showing off," Xianxia Dingwa pointed out. However, he wasn't overly jealous. Though he had not gotten the chance to receive personal guidance from the Holy Emperor, his old man was still an elite of inscription tier, after all, and that was enough to guide him to extreme bone tier. On the other hand, forming a friendship with a freak like Ling Han could possibly bring him endless help in future. Perhaps it would allow him to stand out from the rest of the Shenyuan clan. The two of them walked side by side. When they arrived at the plaza, they saw that 1/3 of the people had already returned, and on the high platform the Holy Emperor Chen Fengyan, Grand Tutor Hong, and the council chairman Yang Bai were already waiting there. Everyone entered the plaza and obediently stood there, waiting for Chen Fengyan to personally announce the results of the competition. After another half an hour, Chen Fengyan stood up and said, "I hereby announce that the champion of this hunting competition is Ling Han." Although everyone already knew this result, hearing it from Chen Fengyan's mouth still caused their hearts to shudder. "Pa pa pa! Grand Tutor Hong and Yang Bai were the first to applaud. Even the two of them were clapping, so who would dare not follow suit? Instantly, a round of applause rang out in the plaza. The Holy Emperor personally announced this, and Grand Tutor Hong and the council chairman took the lead in applauding. Just how exciting was this? Quite a number of people were thinking that they would definitely work hard next year, and also become a glorious figure like Ling Han. Chun Fengyan pressed his hands down, signaling for everyone to stop clapping, and said, "I am very gratified. You all." He had just started, when he suddenly stopped, and raised his head to look at the sky in the west. Everyone was at a loss. What was wrong with the Holy Emperor? They couldn't help but look over as well, but the sky in the west was completely clear. There was not a single dark cloud, nor was there a single bird. What was the Holy Emperor looking at? "Your Majesty!" Grand Tutor Hong walked over and called out softly. He couldn't just leave everyone hanging, right? Chun Fengyan waved his hand, and Grand Tutor Hong immediately shut up obediently. In the Dark North Nation, Chun Fengyan possessed supreme authority. Everyone could only listen obediently to him. After a while, a figure shot over from the distance. With a flash, he had covered more than 300 meters, his speed astonishingly fast. It had to be 4 times the speed of sound, right? This figure leaped over and landed on the high platform. All the guards drew their sabers at the same time. Who would be so bold to actually dare challenge the Holy Emperor's authority? "Your Majesty!" The person clasped his hands in greeting towards Chun Fengyan. "General Hengtian!" Everyone exclaimed in shock. This person was actually General Hengtian, one of the 4 great generals. However, this was a top-notch elite only inferior to the Holy Emperor, and he was actually riddled with wounds that dripped with blood. What had happened? General Hengtian was one of the few elites of inscription tier, and he was actually covered with injuries. He was in an extremely sorry state. What was going on here? Who in the world could wound him and injure him to this extent? Tang Yu and the other descendants of General Hengtian all exclaimed in shock. This was the pillar of support for their Tang clan. If General Hengtian collapsed, the glory of the Tang clan would also be gone. Subject Tang. "What powerful enemy have you encountered?" Chun Fengyan asked softly. "Your Majesty, it's a demonic rat," General Hengtian said with a bow. Everyone in the world only knew that the Holy Emperor was the strongest elite, but only those with powerful strength like them knew that this Holy Emperor was more than 10,000 miles ahead of everyone else. In front of Chun Fengyan, he only wanted to worship him. Chun Fengyan gave an "oh" and said, "Tell me the details." "Yes." General Hengtian nodded and said, "I was ordered to eliminate the demonic beasts that destroyed the villages. I finally encountered them 2 days ago, but when I led my troops to meet them, I was severely wounded." A look of grief appeared on his face, and he said, "The 3,000 elite troops that I brought were all killed. In order to report the strength of the demonic rat to your Majesty, I fled with my life. Please punish me, your Majesty." Chun Fengyan's expression was slightly dark. 3,000 elite soldiers had all been killed, and this caused a stabbing pain in his heart. And hearing the words of General Hengtian, everyone was extremely shocked. The one who defeated General Hengtian was actually a demonic beast? What demonic beast was so outrageously bold that it actually dared to commit a crime in the Dark North Nation? However, he was very strong. This was General Hengtian that he had defeated. Subject Tang, you don't have to blame yourself. It's not your fault, Chun Fengyan said. He looked to the west and continued, "Moreover, we'll be able to exact revenge soon." What? General Hengtian couldn't help but turn around to look, only to see a black shadow shuttling over from the sky. This was a massive rat about the size of a normal human. It flew over like a streak of light, without any rise or fall in its course at all. Flying? A demonic rat that could fly? They clearly hadn't seen any wings on it, so how could it fly? Did this mean that its cultivation level had reached an indescribable level, that it could even fly physically? Gagaga! The rat released a strange laugh. So, this so-called emperor is here. Ling Han's heart clenched. Sure enough, this was the demonic rat that had escaped from the formation. Compared to that day, its strength had increased by who knew how many times. After leaving its weakened state, it was so powerful that it could make one lose all hope. Would even an Enlightenment tier elite possess such strength? How dare you? Grand Tutor Hong and Yang Bai immediately rebuked harshly. Two minor characters who are only in the inscription tier dare to be impudent in front of Lord Rat? The demonic rat said coldly, "What General Hungtian, what shameless boasting." He was smacked down by Lord Rat with a single paw. "If it weren't for the fact that I wanted to use him to lead the way, I would have killed all of you. Do you think that this kind of trash would be able to escape from Lord Rat?" Hiss! Hearing these words, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. This demonic rat was obviously aiming for the Holy Emperor. What kind of confidence did he have that he didn't even take the Holy Emperor seriously? However, if its words weren't false, then even General Hungtian wouldn't be able to withstand a single strike from it. Just how powerful would his abilities be? He would probably be able to compete with the Holy Emperor. Neither Grand Tutor Hong nor Yang Bai looked afraid, because Chun Fengyan was standing behind them. Everyone had this kind of belief in their hearts, and that was as long as their Holy Emperor was present, he would be able to suppress everything. "After seeing your Majesty, why aren't you paying your respects?" Grand Tutor Hong asked coldly. "Ha ha ha. Just a little kid in Enlightenment tier. Is he worthy of Lord Rat's respect?" The demonic rat laughed loudly, its expression filled with disdain. "Impudence!" Grand Tutor Hong charged over, his blood and chi boiling at the first instant. He knew that his strength was definitely inferior to the demonic rat, so he had to go all out. Not only that, but he also took out a sword. Patterns of light flickered, and sword chi surged. Sigh, this planet has really declined. Just how prosperous had it been in the past? Too bad, too bad. The demonic rat clicked his tongue as he casually waved his front claws. Pa, there was no flash of light, but Grand Tutor Hong was sent flying. Sigh, this world has been suppressed too much. It's already been so many days, and Lord Rat's strength still hasn't recovered by 1/10,000th. Everyone was gaping, completely rendered speechless. Grand Tutor Hong was an elite of the inscription tier, yet he was actually no match for the demonic rat. What was even more shocking was that the demonic rat actually didn't use its full strength. Heavens, just how terrifying was this demonic rat in its strongest state. Doubt arose in everyone's minds for the first time. Could the Holy Emperor defeat this demonic rat? It was not that the Holy Emperor was not strong enough, but rather that this demonic rat was so terrifyingly heaven-defying. "Do you also want to be sent flying by Lord Rat?" The demonic rat looked at Yang Bai and bared his teeth in a grin, revealing his two massive front teeth. Yang Bai humphed and didn't retreat. Hee hee. Lord Rat's ears have grown tired of hearing these words these days. Something about how the Holy Emperor is invincible, how the Holy Emperor is invincible in the universe. Lord Rat will show you today that even the so-called Holy Emperor can only prostrate at the feet of Lord Rat. The demonic rat was very arrogant. It released its own aura, which surged out in all directions like a tsunami wave. This aura was incredibly terrifying, and even Yang Bai's body was trembling. It was as if a gust of wind could blow him over. Even someone as strong as Yang Bai was like this, so there was no need to mention the others. The entire plaza was filled with people kneeling. It should be known that the people here were all the pillars of support of the Dark North Nation, yet they could not block a sliver of aura from the demonic rat. What did this mean? A demonic rat was enough to sweep aside all opposition in the Dark North Nation. Ling Han was also unable to stand. This pressure was too terrifying. But how could he possibly kneel down in front of a demonic rat? He forcibly leaned back and flopped onto the ground instead. Just as Yang Bai could no longer hold on, and his spine was about to be bent, a hand stretched out from behind him and pressed down on his shoulder. Instantly, a power circulated, causing him to straighten his back again. "Your Majesty!" Yang Bai was so excited that he was about to cry. Chun Fengyan nodded and said, "Subject Yang, go and rest first." "Yes, Your Majesty," Yang Bai said respectfully. He naturally knew that he was completely no match for this demonic rat. He couldn't even match its aura, and if he stubbornly helped, he would completely be holding Chun Fengyan back. The demonic rat looked surprised and stared at Chun Fengyan. How can a mere Enlightenment tier elite rival Lord Rat's aura? Unless you're not an Enlightenment tier elite. This is my territory. You killed my citizens, so I'll make you pay with your life today, Chun Fengyan said calmly. It was as if he weren't facing an indescribably powerful demonic beast, but rather facing an extremely ordinary demonic beast. Gagaga. Shameless boasting. What shameless boasting? The demonic rat laughed loudly. Chun Fengyan leaped forward at an indescribable speed, instantly appearing before the demonic rat. It was as if he had been standing right there in the first place. Pong! Chun Fengyan threw a punch, and the demonic rat was sent flying. One punch, dealt with, fuck. There was complete silence. Just how domineering and powerful had this demonic rat been before? He destroyed an entire army by himself, and furthermore, they were the elites under General Hengtian. He had even beaten General Hengtian to the point that he fled with serious injuries. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to use him as bait, General Hengtian would have died long ago. And the moment the demonic rat appeared, he was able to gain the upper hand with a show of strength. He flew over through the skies and defeated Grand Tutor Hong with a single strike, his aura suppressing the whole area, causing the council chairman to almost fall to his knees. Wasn't this a display of invincibility? Just when everyone was in despair, their holy emperor made his move. He had dealt with it with a single punch. Boom! An instant later, the whole area exploded with intense cheers. It was like a landslide, like a tsunami. Everyone was hysterical, disregarding everything else. They did not care even if they were screaming their lungs out. At this moment, they only wanted to vent the excitement in their hearts. This was their holy emperor, their god, an absolutely invincible king tier. Ling Han was also dumbfounded. He had always thought that the demonic rat's strength was not limited to the inscription tier, and judging by its tone just now, it didn't even care about an enlightenment tier. It was very likely at a cultivation level above enlightenment tier. However, such a demonic beast with terrifying abilities was sent flying by a punch from Chun Fengyan. Just how high was the cultivation level of this holy emperor? Everyone said that he was in the enlightenment tier, and looking at him now, ho-ho, who was he kidding? Ahead of them, dust took the form of a mushroom cloud that rose into the air. After a long time, it slowly dispersed, revealing a massive deep pit. It was as wide as 0.5 kilometers, and in the center of the deep pit lay the demonic rat. Half of its body had already been blasted into smithereens, and a large amount of blood was flowing out. The blood was crystalline, transparent, and glowing. Gee! The demonic rat let out a pained groan, and actually got back to its feet. Everyone was stunned. He could still get back up even with one half of his body missing? What a monster! The demonic rat's whole body was circulating with brilliance, and it could be clearly seen that there was a bronze-colored alchemical bead glowing inside its body, circulating with slivers of mystical power. Its flesh and blood immediately grew at a visible rate, and that damaged half of its body was actually recovering. Your Majesty! Yang Bai hurriedly called out. Your Majesty! Grand Tutor Hong also called out. The demonic rat was presently recovering, so it should be in its weakest state. It was naturally best to make a move now. Chun Fengyan placed his hands behind his back, his expression calm. He was neither angry nor pleased. It was as if in his eyes, even this powerful demonic rat was only so. It was beneath him to launch a sneak attack at such a time. The demonic rat's recovery speed was very, very fast, but that copper-colored alchemical bead was also becoming dull, as if it had turned from a pearl into rubble. Damn it! Damn it! The demonic rat had already recovered completely. Its two small eyes emitted a blood-red light, as it stared fixedly at Chun Fengyan. You are definitely not in the enlightenment tier. Definitely not. Chun Fengyan placed his hands behind his back, not bothering to answer. Damn it, You actually made me expend my inner core and self-destruct my cultivation level to heal my injuries. You deserve to die 10,000 times. The demonic rat shouted again, gritting its teeth. If it weren't for the fact that Lord Rat hasn't recovered his strength yet, I wouldn't have been forced to this extent by you. Are you done yet? Chen Fengyan finally spoke up. He took a step forward, and a devastating aura instantly surged into the surroundings. Even heaven and earth paled in comparison, and all of the trees in the surroundings started to rise. It was as if they were expressing their desire to submit to him. Your Majesty! Everyone was numb with excitement. Just how many times stronger was this aura compared to the demonic rat? Moreover, the demonic rat's aura was only powerful, but it also carried a hint of evil. Meanwhile, Chun Fengyan's aura was vast and majestic, and there was no comparison at all. Everyone willingly knelt down, cheering loudly. The demonic rat also paled in shock, and blurted out, "How is this possible? This planet has been sealed by a formation, and the power of heaven and earth is extremely weak. How can you possibly reach the core formation tier, or even in fact, even stronger?" Chun Fengyan walked forward step by step, and a hair-raising scene appeared. After taking a few steps, he actually stepped into the air. Hiss! Beneath them, everyone was so excited that they wanted to cry. This was their holy emperor, an invincible, supreme god. You. The demonic rat was also so scared that all its hair stood on end. It knew better than anyone else that though a cultivator at the core formation tier could fly, he had to maintain a state of rapid movement. Otherwise, he would still be unable to escape the effects of gravity, and would fall down from the skies. Every step he took in the air was as if gravity did not exist at all. This was definitely not just the cultivation level of the core formation tier. Heavens! How could there be such a terrifying existence outside the prison? The demonic rat no longer had any thoughts of revenge. With a turn of its body, and a flip of its 4 legs, its figure immediately sank into the ground. It had dug a hole and fled. This was the specialty of rats. By nature, they knew how to dig holes, and he was a being of the core formation tier. Even if his strength had dropped drastically, it was no problem for him to use this natural talent. It was sure that if it fled through the air, it would definitely be intercepted by Chun Fengyan. However, if it fled through the ground, if it admitted that it was second, how many people would dare claim to be first? Dig. It dug madly and kept digging into the ground. First, it went down a few dozen km, then dug a hole horizontally, leaving this place far behind. It swore that it would never come to this country again. Pong! Just as it was thinking this, it felt the ground shake, and a strange power assaulted it. Then, the ground in front of it became incredibly hard, and even its claws found it very difficult to dig through. What happened? The more it dug, the more difficult it became. Finally, it discovered that this ground was as hard as godly metal and divine metal. Even its sharp claws could not dig out the slightest bit. The demonic rat had not even finished this thought, when it felt its body tremble, and even the surrounding soil around it had been grabbed. It was shocked to discover that its body had been trapped in thick mud and rocks, with only its head sticking out. It was now slowly floating up into the sky, floating towards Chun Fengyan. The demonic rat was almost scared out of its wits. This human in front of it was really too strong, wasn't he? He had forcibly plucked it out of the ground. It should be known that it had burnt its inner core, and for a short period of time, its strength had recovered to at least half of its prime condition. However, it didn't even have the courage to oppose him. This gap was as wide as the gap between heaven and earth. "I said that I want you to pay with your life," Chen Fengyan said calmly. "Spare me, your majesty. Spare me." The demonic rat immediately gave in, having none of the backbone of an elite. "I am willing to submit to your majesty, and work like an ox or horse, as long as your majesty commands me." Seeing this scene and hearing these words, everyone felt a strong sense of pride. This was their holy emperor, invincible in this world. So what if it was a demonic rat? So what if it had defeated the 4 great generals, Grandmaster Hong, and the others? In front of their holy emperor, he was nothing but trash. Hong Tianbu? He was only a junior. Amongst the juniors, he could be considered a prodigy, but compared with the holy emperor? Trash. Your Majesty, spare me. Spare me. The demonic rat repeatedly begged for mercy. Chan Fengyan smiled faintly and said, You killed my citizens, and you still want to live? Pong, his palm pressed down, and the demonic rat was blown into smithereens along with the entire prison forged from dirt. He killed him without the slightest hesitation. The strength of this demonic rat was completely superior to the 4 great generals. Although it was unknown what the core formation tier was, it was definitely above enlightenment tier. This kind of elite was willing to join their side, yet Chun Fengyan didn't even consider it and simply killed him. It had to be admitted that this holy emperor was truly majestic. Killing my citizens? Who cares what strength you have? I will kill you. This was an attitude. The Dark North Nation could not be offended, and the people of the Dark North Nation could not be touched. Otherwise, a debt of blood would have to be repaid in blood. Quite a few people were already crying in their excitement. With such a holy emperor, what more could they ask for? Your Majesty, Holy Emperor. Automatically, at least 90% of the people knelt down, paying their respects to this holy emperor. Chun Fengyan raised his hand, signaling for everyone to stand up. He then said, Ling Han, follow me. Ling Han nodded, and similarly praised this holy emperor in his heart. Previously, when he had seen the unbearable behavior of Xianxia and the others, he had also looked down slightly on Chen Fengyan, but now he understood that it was indeed true that a dragon had 9 sons, and they were all different. He leaped forward, following behind Chen Fengyan. Chen Fengyan didn't bring him to the imperial palace. Instead, he led him into the mountains and arrived at a secluded location. Those modified versions of the mystical power pill, Qi return pill, and so on were all created by you? Unexpectedly, Chen Fengyan didn't mention teaching Ling Han a martial arts technique, and instead asked about irrelevant matters. Ling Han's heart jolted slightly, but when he recalled that Chen Fengyan was the master of the Dark North Nation, and some things may be concealed from others, but how could they be concealed from him? Moreover, this wasn't a bad thing. Ling Han nodded and said, I do indeed have some accomplishments in alchemy. It's not just alchemy, right? Chen Fengyan said with a smile as he pointed at Ling Han. Ling Han chuckled. He knew that the matter of formations couldn't be hidden from this holy emperor, so he simply admitted it. Very good, very good. A smile appeared on Chen Fengyan's face, and he said, If you only have the natural talent to cultivate, then you can only reap the benefits yourself. However, improving pill recipes and teaching the masses is a great merit. Thank you, Holy Emperor. Ling Han clasped his hands in respect. The strength of this holy emperor was unfathomable. In this world where strength was revered, he was indeed worthy of his respect. Of course, respect did not mean reverence. He would definitely not fear anyone. Chen Fengyan took 2 steps forward and said, At first, I had only planned to teach you 1 martial arts technique. However, with your great merit, if I only teach you 1 martial arts technique, it would seem that I am too petty. Ling Han was extremely shameless, and he said, Then your Majesty can bestow some treasured fruits on me. It would be best if they are of the life element. Chen Fengyan glanced at him, and couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself. You're really not reserved at all. Your Majesty is magnanimous, and keeps the world in your mind. I am only stating my own needs truthfully, Ling Han said. Chen Fengyan shook his head and said, It's best to cultivate on your own. Don't always think of shortcuts. Moreover, it's also beneficial to experience some setbacks sometimes. So be it if he didn't give it to him. He even had to lecture him. Ling Han mocked internally, but of course he wouldn't say it out loud. Chen Fengyan pondered for a moment before saying, All right, let me talk to you about the path of cultivation. You're not going to teach martial arts techniques anymore? Ling Han faltered for a moment. However, he wasn't disappointed. After all, judging by Chen Fengyan's tone, it was already petty to teach a martial arts technique to him. Thus, the path of cultivation that he spoke of was most likely much more valuable than a martial arts technique. "Please provide guidance, Your Majesty," he said respectfully. Chun Fengyan paced around with his hands clasped behind his back and said, "Let's talk about martial arts techniques first." He casually grabbed out, and a fiery flame instantly rose from his hand. Pressing down again, the fiery flame disappeared, and what replaced it was ice. With another flip, his whole hand had turned into metal. Ling Han was astonished. During this process, he hadn't discovered that Chun Fengyan had used any martial arts techniques. In other words, Chun Fengyan had only used a single martial arts technique. So why had he drawn flames, ice, and even turned his hand into metal? You want to know why? Chun Fengyan asked with a smile. Ling Han nodded and replied, "Yes." Chun Fengyan gazed at the sky and said slowly, "In this world, aside from mystical power, there are other powers. These powers are of a higher level, and you can't obtain them through cultivation. For example, these flames, ice, and so on. Then how do I use it?" Ling Han asked. He had seen Hong Tianliang use some kind of mysterious black energy. In terms of power alone, this kind of energy was not very strong, but in terms of destructive power, this energy was terrifying. Similarly, there was also the spirit tool, and none of them won with brute force. It was just that the energy they shot out had extremely terrifying destructive power, which could achieve the effect of tearing through defense. "Spiritual power," Chun Fengyan said. "Only spiritual power can stimulate this kind of high-level energy." Ling Han gave an ah. As it turned out, this energy was stimulated by spiritual power? Then spirit tool? Could the formation patterns on the spirit tool have a similar effect? That's right. Formations required spiritual power, and the formation patterns on the spirit tool were in line with actual formation patterns. The fact that you can concoct alchemical pills and set up formations means that you've already cultivated your spiritual power and possess the foundations to use this energy, Chun Fengyan continued. However, if you want to use this energy, you need to grasp the corresponding diagram. The fire energy corresponds to the fire spirit diagram, and the ice energy corresponds to the ice spirit diagram. As far as I have grasped, there are a total of 36 types of spirit diagrams. However, the number of higher-level energy should be far more than that. You have improved the pill recipes and have achieved universal merit, so I will specially teach you 2 spirit diagrams. Which 2 have you decided on? He briefly explained this to Ling Han. Among the high-level energies, there was energy similar to the 5 elements, lightning-aligned energy, and pure destructive energy. The amount of these energies had surpassed the power system of the Genesis world. Ling Han naturally wanted to grasp all the different energies, but he also knew that this was unrealistic. After some consideration, he said, "I want to learn the spirit diagram of metal and the spirit diagram of stone." Chun Fengyan showed an expression of approval and said, "The energy of metal is indestructible, and the energy of stone is more inclined towards defense. One is offensive and the other is defensive. You have made the right choice." Letting Ling Han choose the spirit diagram was actually also a kind of test. Chun Fengyan shook his right hand, and 2 jade plates appeared in his hand. He didn't see where he had taken them out from, probably a spatial spirit tool. And he was the noble holy emperor, so it was absolutely normal for him to possess a spatial spirit tool. "Place the jade plate on your forehead and activate it with your spiritual power," Chun Fengyan said as he handed the jade plate over. He had initially thought that the jade disc was going to be given to him, but looking at Chun Fengyan's expression, it was obvious that he was going to take it back. Right then, Ling Han pressed the jade disc against his forehead. With a touch of his spiritual power, innumerable seals instantly appeared in his mind. He clearly didn't recognize any of them, yet he seemed to be able to understand them. This was a kind of communication technique, and the object of communication was precisely high-level energy, but this kind of energy could not be touched by the physical body. One had to use spiritual power to communicate. Countless comprehensions instantly arose in Ling Han's mind. Ling Han greedily absorbed this knowledge, turning it into his own. "Oh, so that's how it is. Oh, so that's how it is." His eyes were closed, but his brows were continuously twitching. After a few hours, he suddenly opened his eyes. How much have you comprehended? Chen Fengyan asked. Ling Han was slightly touched. This was the Holy Emperor, and his abilities were world-shakingly powerful. Yet now, he was willing to wait here for the sake of giving him pointers. How many people would possess such grace? There should be some progress. He nodded, stretched out his hand, and visualized the spirit diagram of metal in his mind. His spiritual power channeled rapidly, spreading out in the surrounding area. Instantly, he discovered that there were countless starlight particles all around him. They were all exuding a golden luster, but the golden light emitted by some particles was incredibly bright, while others were very dim. These corresponded to the energy of metal. The brighter energy was stronger, and the dimmer energy was weaker. Furthermore, these particles were not stationary, but were moving at a high speed. Retrieve. In his mind, spiritual power formed into the form of the spirit diagram. Instantly, those particles flew over like moths flying into a flame. Ling Han stretched out his right hand, and these particles wrapped around his hand. After spending about a minute, the number of these particles had reached a sufficient extent. There was no need for him to use his spiritual power, and he could already see them with the naked eye. They had formed a golden brilliance. Use spiritual power as the core to materialize the energy, Chen Fengyan said. Ling Han did as he was told. That layer of golden light immediately solidified, as if he was wearing a pair of gloves on his fists. However, these gloves looked a little awkward. Part of it was especially bright, while some parts were slightly dimmer. Ling Han knew that this was a pile of particles that he had extracted. Thus, in some places where the energy was denser, it would be brighter, and in some places the energy would be scarce and it would be much dimmer. The result of this was that it would decrease the destructive power of the energy. He sighed. What a failure. Chen Fengyan, however, looked surprised. This is your first time communicating with spiritual power, and you're actually able to do this? In his eyes, it was already very impressive that Ling Han could sense the energy of the particles in such a short amount of time. However, Ling Han had still managed to condense them into something solid. He had succeeded in the first attempt. Though the energy was still very mixed up and he had taken a little too long, based on the fact that this was only his first attempt, this had even surpassed the level of perfection. Ling Han was also taken aback. His performance was actually good. Tvi already seen you in a new light. Looks like you're not only astonishingly talented in alchemy, but also more talented in martial arts, Chen Fengyan said. Don't praise people like that. They would blush. Though this was the honest truth, Ling Han thought shamelessly. You can slowly cultivate this. If you really want a battle, you can't spend a minute or even longer to condense the high-level energy, Chen Fengyan said. Ling Han nodded in understanding. Unless he extracted the high-level energy right from the start, it would be extremely dangerous to spend a long time channeling it during battle. Not only would he fail to win, but he might even endanger himself. The heaven and earth powers have just awakened, so there's still relatively little energy. Even cultivating spiritual power is relatively difficult, but you definitely can't underestimate it. The effects of spiritual power far exceed your imagination, Chen Fengyan said with a serious expression. Ling Han was naturally aware of this. Right now, his greatest trump card was the flying sword attack that was driven by his spiritual power. Ling Han nodded. Additionally, spirit diagrams are the same as cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques. There are also differences in quality. The spirit diagrams that I've mastered can't be considered high-level, so if you have the chance to obtain high-level spirit diagrams in the future, don't miss it, Chen Fengyan said. Ling Han nodded again. Just now, when he was visualizing the spirit diagram, he had been thinking that if the spirit diagram could be more complicated, then wouldn't he be able to extract even more high-level energy that time? Let's set this aside first, Chen Fengyan continued. You just need to practice hard. There are many secrets regarding high-level energy, and it's enough for you to study for a long time. He paused for a moment, then continued. Now, I will talk to you about cultivation. There's a limit to every cultivation level. For example, meridian opening tier martial artists can cultivate to 20 meridians. Ling Han nodded. This limit did not seem to be too difficult to reach. At least, it was possible that 1/10 of the people in the Imperial Capital Academy had attained this kind of accomplishment. Chun Fengyan looked at him and said with a smile, "You didn't just open 20 meridians, right? The small meridians in your body should have been opened as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't have such astonishing power now. As expected of the Holy Emperor, such insight." Ling Han nodded and said, "Your Majesty is indeed wise." He flattered him in passing. Chun Fengyan naturally wouldn't pay any heed to this, and he continued, "In the case of blood transformation tier, the end is after the 5th change, but what about the limit? 6th change. After the 6th change, one will return to the basics, and the blood will return to normal." Ling Han pondered for a moment, before asking, "Is there any 7th change?" 20 meridians was already the limit, but being able to open up the small meridians, he had pushed the limit to another level. Did blood transformation tier have something similar? Chun Fengyan couldn't help but laugh in spite of himself, saying, "Do you think that because there are many people who have reached the pinnacle of the meridian opening tier, it is the same for blood transformation tier?" He shook his head and said, "The higher the cultivation level, the harder it is to break through to the pinnacle. I can say with absolute certainty that out of those who have reached the 20th meridian of the meridian opening tier, less than 1/100th of them would have managed to reach 6th change. It should be known that there were actually not many that could cultivate up to 20 meridians in meridian opening tier, and there was only 1% that could cultivate up to 6th change, which showed how difficult it was to attain 6th change. Extreme bone tier is above blood transformation tier, and they shatter their own bones over and over again before reforming them. After 5 times, that's the end," Chun Fengyan continued. "However, some people can shatter 6 times or even 7 times in fact. The more times they're reforged and tempered, the tougher their bones will be. However, this does not seem to have much of an advantage in extreme bone tier, but as your cultivation level increases, you will discover that the toughness of godly bones has great significance. Above the extreme bone tier is the inscription tier, which is to carve patterns on the organs inside the body to strengthen them. The heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys are called the 5 palaces. This is also the limit of the inscription tier, but there are more than 5 organs in your body. Tell me yourself, what kind of limit can you reach?" Ling Han gritted his teeth. It was very difficult to cultivate to a high cultivation level, and it was even more difficult to cultivate each cultivation level to the limit. Don't rush to breakthrough. You must cultivate to a point where you can no longer advance, and then make another attempt, Chun Fengyan said solemnly. Understood, Ling Han said respectfully. He naturally could distinguish whether others were sincerely persuading him or not. Chun Fengyan seemed to have high hopes for him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given him such a detailed explanation. With him being the Holy Emperor, this was an extremely high recognition. Don't look at how calm it is now, but in the future, there will be many, many existences like the demonic rat, and there will not be a small number whose abilities would surpass mine. Chun Fengyan said ruefully. I am only one person and would be very busy, so I need you, as well as people like you, to quickly mature and help me share my burdens and save the lives of the people. Ling Han nodded and said seriously, I will definitely not disappoint your Majesty's expectations. He would also not tolerate beings like the demonic rat who treated humans like rations. Chun Fengyan smiled and said, Go on. Cultivate well. Don't worry about anything else. If you encounter any difficulties, I'll naturally stand up for you. This was equivalent to giving Ling Han an imperial sword copyright. Thank you, Your Majesty. Ling Han bowed respectfully. Though this was what Chun Fengyan had said, it was definitely impossible that he would seek out this holy emperor for some trivial matter. How could he have so much free time? Thus, unless he really encountered great trouble. Keep up the good work, Chun Fengyan said as he patted Ling Han's shoulder. He then leaped up and soared into the sky. Ling Han couldn't help but feel curious. What cultivation level did this holy emperor possess? Compared to Brother Monkey, which of them was stronger? Brother Monkey shouldn't be weak, Ling Han murmured as he walked back. Although Chun Fengyan hadn't taught him any martial arts techniques, he had opened a completely new door to him. This was even more useful than teaching him 8 to 10 top-notch martial arts techniques. After returning to the Imperial Capital Academy, he temporarily set aside his formations and alchemy and focused on cultivating his spirit diagram. To extract high-level energy, one would have to visualize the spirit diagram and construct it with spiritual power. This was a very complicated process. Visualizing the spirit diagram was a test of comprehension. This was because the spirit diagram was extremely complex. If there was the slightest mistake, one would not be able to visualize it, so there was no need to talk about the next step. If spiritual power wasn't strong enough, then there was no way to successfully visualize it. This first step would exclude at least 90% of the current cultivators. Instead, as long as those alchemists and formation masters were willing to spend some time, they would definitely be able to visualize it successfully. After successful visualization, it would have to depend on the strength of spiritual power. The stronger the spiritual power, the more energy particles it could absorb. What Ling Han had to do was to speed up the speed of his visualization of the spirit diagram. To integrate it into actual battle, this process had to be completed within a few seconds or even a second. His improvement was great. Only a day later, he had compressed the time for visualization to half a minute, but his subsequent improvement was slower. 3 days later, he had compressed it to 20 seconds, and another 2 days to 13 seconds. After spending 13 days, Ling Han finally suppressed the time to 2.7 seconds. However, it would be difficult to improve further, and he had encountered a bottleneck. Perhaps he would have to wait until his spiritual power improved further to be able to further shrink the time limit. After witnessing the battle between Chun Fengyan and the demonic rat, Ling Han's horizons instantly widened countless times over. Even the 4 great generals, Grand Tutor Hong, and the others were no longer people he wanted to surpass. Apart from Chun Fengyan, the others were most likely only at the elementary level of cultivation. The only difference was that they had only walked a few more steps. Now that the heaven and earth environment was recovering, it was a good opportunity to overtake them. I'll take care of myself first. After these few days of training, Ling Han's improvement was obvious. The metal energy that he had condensed now was not as mixed as before. Instead, it was a whole. He rubbed his fist lightly on the rock, and there was no need for any power. Wherever the golden light touched, the rock would turn into dust. Its destructive power was very strong. He channeled this power into the power of his fist, and as he shot out a punch, the power of metal was also infused within, instantly destroying most of the surrounding small forest. However, attacking like this would consume a lot of energy. It was only a dozen over punches, and the energy of metal was completely exhausted. It needed to reform, and this not only needed more than 2 seconds, but spiritual power would also be greatly expended. And this had to be used sparingly. Ling Han had obtained a total of 2 spirit diagrams. The other could extract the energy of stone, and he could use it for defense. He manifested this layer of energy on his arm, turning it into something like a gray rock. He then had Huan Shui attack him with her sharp sword, but she was unable to pierce it at all. However, though this defense was powerful, it was also very exhausting on the gray energy. Could not be maintained for too long. This was actually fair. What power could be continuously expended without being exhausted? One attacked while the other defended. For the moment, this was already enough. Ling Han smiled in satisfaction. What he needed now was to increase his spiritual power. This would determine the speed and strength of the special energy he extracted, as well as the might of the flying sword. However, without treasures like the amazing cloud fruit, the improvement of spiritual power was extremely slow. Only when the cultivation level increased, and the level of being soared, would the spiritual power also increase greatly. Ling Han once again focused his energy on cultivating. After opening the upper limit of his cultivation level, he would be able to rapidly increase his abilities. Young master, Huan Shui ran over. Someone delivered a letter. Read it to me. Ling Han was currently studying the circular plate. If he could truly resolve this formation, then he would have another trump card. To Ling Han, You are to join the Hong clan gang before the sun sets tomorrow and hand over the gourd, Huan Shui recited. Ling Han didn't even raise his head and asked, "That's all? No more?" Huan Shui looked at the letter again and shook her head. "Ignore him," Ling Han said. "He didn't even leave his name, and he wanted to scare him?" Of course, even if he left his name, Ling Han wouldn't take it to heart. "Oh," Huan Shui nodded, and as expected, she threw the letter into the trash can. This day passed. Huan Shui was still a little worried. She counted the time. It was morning, noon, and afternoon. Finally, the sun gradually set, and she could no longer see it at all. Thankfully, nothing happened. Who was playing a prank? She was just about to close the door when she saw a figure appear at the end of the street and was slowly walking towards her. Although she wasn't sure at all, Huan Shui had a feeling that this person was targeting young master. She instantly felt as if she was facing a great enemy. One of her arms was still wrapped around the fat pig, while her other hand was holding onto her sword. For better or worse, she was now a blood transformation tier cultivator, so she could share young master's burden. This was a black-robed young man who looked to be in his mid-20s at most. He had a sword at his waist, and there was a jade hair tie on his head. His long hair was tied back, and with the gentle breeze, the hem of his clothes also fluttered lightly, and he appeared to be incredibly carefree. His face was like jade, incredibly handsome. On the way, who knew how many women were captivated by his beauty? Yet it was as if Huan Shui was looking at her enemy. She felt extremely nervous. "It's Fong Zipping, senior brother Fong. He left the academy a long time ago, so why is he back today? I heard that he has been training everywhere with that person, and by now, he probably has the cultivation level of 3rd extreme. 3rd extreme? Following that freakish monster, how could he only have the cultivation level of 3rd extreme? But isn't that person also a 3rd extreme? Just how many years ago was that? I guess that freak might have already advanced into inscription tier." Everyone was whispering among themselves. This black-robed man, Fong Zipping, was clearly very famous. Fong Zipping stopped in front of Huan Shui, smiled faintly and said, "Does Ling Han live here? What do you want?" Huan Shui tightened her grip, causing the perverted pig to instantly spit out his tongue. "Tell Ling Han to come out." Fong Zipping raised his voice slightly. "You have to pass through me first," Huan Shui said as she raised the perverted pig as a shield. She had heard from young master that this pig was extremely tolerant, so it was fine even if she used it as a shield. "Goo!" The little perverted pig kicked its 4 short legs quickly, feeling extremely depressed. It was one thing for Ling Han to use it as a shield, but why had even Huan Shui become like this bastard? Fong Zipping, however, didn't take Huan Shui or the perverted pig seriously at all. He was an extreme bone tier elite, so how could he possibly care about a blood transformation tier cultivator? He directly shot out a punch. Pung, the courtyard wall immediately collapsed. "How dare you!" Huan Shui was furious, and charged forward with her sword in hand. Fong Zipping casually threw a punch, and instantly, Huan Shui was sent flying. She passed through the courtyard and crashed into the inner wall. Quang! The inner wall crumbled, revealing a large hole. In an instant, Ling Han's figure appeared at the hole, looking directly at Fong Zipping. He had just been concentrating his full attention on studying that circular plate, and had not thought that the wall would suddenly be blasted through, and then the little handmaiden collapsed in front of him. With Ling Han's protective personality, he was instantly angered. Fong Zipping was completely unconcerned. He looked back at Ling Han and said calmly, "You are very bold, to actually dare to disobey my command." Obviously, he was the one who had written the note. Ling Han's heart blazed with fury, but his expression was extremely calm, as he said, "You are also quite bold, to actually dare to hurt my maid." Fong Zipping faltered for a moment before bursting into laughter. After a while, he stopped laughing and said, "You're called the second heavenly Tao, and this makes subordinates like us very displeased. You are just some random nobody, and you think that just because you achieved some results, you can be on par with our Lord. However, the Lord is generous, so he asked me to give you a choice. Join the Hong clan gang. You still have one last chance. Hong Tianbu was truly conceited. He couldn't even be bothered to personally deal with Ling Han. Instead, he simply sent a subordinate. However, he did indeed have reason to be conceited. Fang Zipping was in the extreme bone tier, so wouldn't it be easy for him to suppress a blood transformation tier elite? Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "If you kneel down now and apologize to my maidservant, I can consider only breaking one of your arms." "Haha, you're indeed arrogant." Fang Zipping shook his head and said, "Junior brother, you're too young. You have no idea how astonishing the Lord's might was in the past. He alone can rival the world, and you can't even compare to him. Since you're so stupid, let me use my fists to teach you a lesson." Fang Zipping stretched out his hands and clenched them into fists. Boom! Fiery flames actually started to burn on his hands. What's going on? Heavens! How could there be flames burning on his hand? I feel that these flames are very frightening. I feel that if I come into contact with them, my whole person would be burnt into ashes. The surrounding students were all astounded. Merely a glance was enough to cause a chill to rise up in their hearts. Just how terrifying was the might of this flame. Yet Ling Han was surprised. Fang Zipping could actually use his spiritual power to stimulate the energy of a higher level. Hong Tianbu was truly remarkable. Spirit diagrams were needed to stimulate higher-level energy, and spirit diagrams should be extremely valuable items, but first there was Hong Tianliang and then Fang Zipping. Both of them could stimulate higher-level energy, and they were different energies at that. In other words, Hong Tianbu had mastered at least 2 types of spirit diagrams. His luck was truly good. Ling Han scoffed and said, "You think you're the only one who knows how to do it?" With a shake of his hands, golden light instantly flickered. And Fang Zipping couldn't help but look surprised. A blood transformation tier cultivator can actually grasp high-level energy? I'm going to beat you up even. Ling Han shot out a punch. Boom! A burst of power shot out, bringing with it golden energy, greatly increasing the might of this attack. Fang Zipping also threw a punch. Pong! The 2 powers and 2 types of energy clashed fiercely. Not only did a powerful shockwave surge out, but there was also the chaotic flicker of golden light and sparks. "I've really underestimated you." Fang Zipping waved his hand, appearing very relaxed. "Your power is actually at the first level of extreme bone tier." What? The people in the area were all stunned. Ling Han was too freakish, wasn't he? Based on his information, he was still only a second change. No wonder this guy could suppress all the prodigies of the other parties in the hunting competition and get the first place. Ling Han stared coldly at Fang Zipping and said, "Apologize. You think you're worthy." Fang Zipping scoffed. Ling Han took a deep breath. The other's strength was indeed very strong. It was very possible that he was an existence of 4th extreme or even 5th extreme, but how could he possibly swallow his anger? His own people had been beaten, so if he didn't step out, would he still be able to stand tall in future? They could only battle. Hong Tianbu, oh Hong Tianbu, in the end he still made a move on him. Though this person had not personally appeared, and had only sent out one of his subordinates, having an extreme bone tier deal with a blood transformation tier, this was still a one-sided suppression. Humph! What heaven-suppressing freak! Is this all you've got? Xiao Ling Han charged out. He had already drawn the broken sword. Shwa! As the sword slashed out, sword chi danced unhindered. The advantage of a spirit tool was that it didn't need to expend one's own spiritual power. It could stimulate high-level energy and turn it into an attack. At the same time, Ling Han's left hand clenched into a fist. His fury was flaring, affecting his mood, and he couldn't help but use fists of fury. His punch was imbued with a high-level golden energy, and it could be said to be indestructible. No matter how freakish you are, you're only a blood transformation tier cultivator, Fang Zipping said with a cold chuckle. He brandished his fists in response. Pong, pong, pong. The 2 of them were extremely quick, and their attacks continued to blast towards one another. Fang Zipping couldn't help but look surprised. This was because Ling Han's fist strength had indeed reached the level of 1st extreme, but compared to him it was still far inferior. However, Ling Han's grasp of high-level energy was much stronger than his. How was this possible? He was an extreme bone tier elite, and his level of being far surpassed Ling Han's. Logically speaking, the strength of his spiritual power should have overwhelmed Ling Han's. However, the high-level energy that he stimulated was inferior to Ling Han's. What did this mean? The other party's spirit diagram was definitely higher in level than his. He instantly grew a covetous desire. Although the majority of cultivators didn't know the amazing uses of spiritual power, which could communicate with high-level energy, he had traveled the world with Hong Tianbu and learned this technique. So he naturally knew how much the battle prowess would improve after grasping high-level energy. Thus, when he discovered that Ling Han had grasped a higher-grade spirit diagram, a powerful longing naturally rose up from the bottom of his heart. He definitely had to get hold of it. "Brat, I'll show you my true strength." He laughed loudly, and using 2 times the speed of sound, he charged towards Ling Han. He raised his left hand high and suddenly stabbed out. Strangely, a long spear actually stretched out from his fist. Who would have thought that after throwing a punch, a spear would appear in his fist? This wasn't high-level energy. Ling Han saw very clearly that this spear of his opponent had not appeared out of thin air, but had rather grown out of his fist. "Are you a fucking monster?" Ling Han activated the shuttle steps and dodged this attack with ease. Pong! The spear missed its target, yet it easily pierced through the wall behind Ling Han. "Are you curious?" Fong Zipping smiled faintly and raised his left hand. That spear actually slowly shrunk back into his hand. The world only knows that extreme bone tier elites temper their godly bones, but doesn't know that these molted bone scraps can still have other uses. Ling Han couldn't help but feel disgusted, and asked, "This is formed from bone scraps?" "That's right, because it's shed from your own body. It can naturally be perfectly fused into one's own body," Fong Zipping said loftily. "Your own body is the strongest weapon." Ling Han also believed in his own strength. External power could only be borrowed or used like a supplement, but the fact that something that had fallen from his body was still used as a weapon and he even had to absorb it back into his body was something that he could not accept. Fortunately, extreme bone tier elites shed bone scraps and not shit or else. Ling Han didn't continue and couldn't help but shiver. Although he hadn't finished speaking, everyone couldn't help but think about it. When they thought of that indescribable scene, they all shivered. Fong Zipping was furious. This brat actually dared to badmouth him? Ignorant! He dashed out. How many people in the Dark North Nation could use bone scraps? This was also something that Hong Tianbu had found out from an ancient book after entering an ancient site. What a superficial and ignorant idiot. "I'll let you have a taste of my strength." Fong Zipping set off in pursuit of Ling Han. The bone spike shot out again like a battle spear. Shio, shio, shio. The tip of the spear flickered with fiery red light, and was still entwined with high-level energy. Ling Han dodged repeatedly. He still didn't know the power of the bone spear, so he didn't dare to take it head-on. Both of their speeds were extremely fast, both of them moving at twice the speed of sound. It was very difficult for either of them to forcefully block the other and begin a head-on battle. On the surface, it was naturally Fong Zipping who had the complete upper hand. Could not be helped. Was the cultivation level above 3rd extreme still incapable of crushing a blood transformation tier? On the other hand, it was truly inconceivable that Ling Han could last so many moves. However, Ling Han was preparing to counterattack. Aside from stimulating high-level energy, his spiritual power could also stimulate flying swords to deliver terrifying attacks. Ling Han is truly astounding. No wonder he was able to get the first place in this hunting competition. He is actually able to battle against an extreme bone tier elite for so long. What level of extreme bone tier is Fong Zipping? Why does it seem like his aura alone is enough to suppress me? I already said, he definitely is stronger than 3rd extreme. Damn it, he's already graduated, and he's an extreme bone tier at that. How can he still strut around in the academy? Is there no one to interfere? On one side, everyone was stunned by Ling Han's strength, and on the other, a sense of unity rose up in them. If anyone could charge into the academy and beat up whoever they wanted, who would still feel safe? Is it because he's that person's subordinate? Someone asked bitterly. Of course, not everyone could act so recklessly. However, Fang Ziping was Hong Tianbu's subordinate, and now he was acting on behalf of Hong Tianbu. If anyone dared to stop him, that would be equivalent to becoming enemies with Hong Tianbu. That was Hong Tianbu, that freak that could suppress the heavens. Thinking of Hong Tianbu, everyone fell silent. If there was anyone in this world that could enjoy special privileges, then Hong Tianbu was definitely one of them. Stop! A cold rebuke rang out. This was a woman's voice, but it sounded very childlike. How could Fang Ziping possibly care? He was already at the cultivation level of 5th extreme, and those that could suppress him were only the 4 great generals, Grand Tutor Hong, and a few other mighty figures. Who in the entire academy would be worthy of his notice? Even if this matter was exposed, Hong Tianbu would still be able to easily settle the matter. Moreover, the Hong clan still had a clansman who was the present Grand Tutor. He continued to attack. Firstly, he wanted to subdue Ling Han, and secondly, he wanted to snatch the spirit diagram that Ling Han had mastered. What he didn't know was that Ling Han's superior grasp of high-level energy was indeed partly due to the spirit diagram, but it was actually also because Ling Han's spiritual power was superior to his. Thus, even if he obtained the spirit diagram that Ling Han had mastered, his improvement would still be limited. Shua, a whip whipped over, and with a pa, wrapped around the bone spear. Fang Ziping pulled forcefully, yet discovered that he couldn't move at all. Only now did he reveal a hint of seriousness, and turned his head to look in the direction of the whip. 3 meters away from him stood a young girl who was only 14 or 15 years old. Her face was filled with anger. Gu Qiuyue. Fang Ziping couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Get lost! Gu Qiuyue shook the whip, and the whip instantly retreated like a snake. A smile slowly spread across Fang Ziping's face, and he said, "The glorious era that belongs to you has long since ended. If you dare to become enemies with my lord, your only fate would be to be crushed into dust. Are you getting lost or not?" Gu Qiuyue asked balefully. Fang Ziping didn't dare to be careless. Even though the woman in front of him looked like a young girl, her true age was close to 40 years old. When she was in her 20s, she had once been a legend of the Imperial Academy, leaving behind an invincible legend. However, after she graduated, the legends naturally slowly dissipated, and added with Hong Tianbu's sudden appearance, she was also largely forgotten. However, this couldn't conceal her strength. After so many years, this woman should have reached 5th extreme by now. He wasn't afraid. An expression of pride appeared on Fang Ziping's face, because he too was a 5th extreme. Furthermore, he had also learnt a great many secret techniques from Hong Tianbu. This was definitely not something that Gu Qiuyue, who had been enrolled in the academy, could compare to. Gu Qiuyue, don't meddle in other people's business. Otherwise, without the Lord's intervention, I'll make you suffer, he said. Good-looking. Gu Qiuyue touched her face and said, I am indeed good-looking, so what need is there for you to give me? Copyright this. Her illness of being too serious was acting up again. Piss off! Fang Ziping roared as he charged over. He threw a punch, and the bone spear transformed into a bolt of white lightning that shot toward Gu Qiuyue. Pa! Gu Qiuyue moved, her whip leaving a series of afterimages. The two of them fought fiercely, and it seemed like it would be hard to decide the victor for a while. Ling Han swept his gaze around, and saw Gu Qiuling in the crowd. He couldn't help but smile at him. Gu Qiuyue must have been informed by him, and that was how she could rush over like this. Meanwhile, Gu Qiuling revealed an honest smile. This expression was definitely the same as Gu Qiuyue's. Gu Qiuyue was definitely a hot-tempered person. When she got into a fight, she would directly boil her blood and qi, pushing her battle prowess to the extreme. Fang Ziping had no choice, and could only boil his blood and qi as well. Otherwise, with a power gap of 2 to 3 times, it would be very difficult for him to last more than 10 minutes. Ling Han saw very clearly that Gu Qiuyue hadn't grasped any high-level energy, so she was at a disadvantage in this aspect. However, in terms of power, it was this young girl like auntie that had an absolute advantage. it was still unknown who would emerge victorious. Go Qiuyue and Fang Zipping were both extreme bone tier elites, their speed reaching twice the speed of sound. Meridian opening tiers couldn't see their figures clearly at all, and even blood transformation tiers found it a bit difficult. They only knew that the afterimages of the golden whip and the white bone spear were endlessly clashing. However, 7 minutes later, the battle was decided. "Get lost," Go Qiuyue reprimanded softly, and Fang Zipping was sent flying. Pong! Fang Zipping fell heavily onto the ground. He quickly got back to his feet, and saw that the white bone spear had already been broken in half, and its sharp point had been sent flying to who knew where. He glared fiercely at Go Qiuyue, but didn't make another move. The two of them had used practically all their techniques just now, and he was indeed at a disadvantage. "You dare to interfere in the matters of our Lord. This matter will definitely not end just like this," Fang Zipping said balefully. "Remember, those who go against our Lord will not have a good end. The only result would be being crushed. Get lost." The response was Go Qiuyue's whip. With a leap, Fang Zipping rapidly retreated. Even if he was no match, how could he not be able to dodge? "Wait," Ling Han said. It was clear that Fang Zipping wanted to flee. Fang Zipping stopped and turned around to look at Ling Han. Could it be that this brat had changed his mind? Ling Han pointed inside the room and said, "Don't say that I didn't give you a chance. Immediately apologize to my maidservant and compensate for her losses. Otherwise, when we meet again, I will take your life." "Ha ha! Ha 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 ha!" Fang Zipping laughed loudly. Was there anything more laughable than this? A blood transformation tier actually dared to threaten an extreme bone tier. However, Ling Han's expression didn't change at all. He simply looked at him coldly. Fang Zipping could no longer laugh. He seemed to be able to see that determination in Ling Han's aloof expression. He would definitely do as he had promised. Even if others had this kind of determination, he would not care, but Ling Han was different. This was a prodigy who could battle against extreme bone tier when he was only in the blood transformation tier. Although he was far from being able to compare to Hong Tianbu, he could still be considered freakish. He withdrew his smile, revealing a sliver of killing intent. Since that was the case, he would first kill Ling Han. "I'll remember you," he said, then turned around and left. With a burst of 2 times the speed of sound, he was naturally astonishingly fast, and soon disappeared from sight. Ling Han stared at Fang Zipping's back until the latter disappeared from sight. He gradually withdrew the killing intent in his heart. Previously, he was definitely not threatening Fang Zipping, but speaking from the bottom of his heart. Since you don't cherish this opportunity, then don't regret being killed by him in the future. He clasped his hands in Go Qiuyue's direction and said, "Thank you." "No need," Go Qiuyue said with a shake of her head. "As a teacher of the academy, it's my duty to protect my students. All right? I'll change your accommodations later." With a wave of her hand, she leaped up and soon disappeared from sight. Ling Han returned to the destroyed room and carried Huan Shui out. He first went to Huan Shui's room and settled her down. Thankfully, the little female attendant had only been knocked unconscious, and her injuries were not very serious. He sat down at the side, and a powerful sense of urgency rose up in his heart. From the moment he had clashed with Hong Tianliang, he knew that there would eventually come a day when he would come into direct conflict with Hong Tianbu. However, he had not thought that he would be standing on opposing sides of Hong Tianbu so soon. Ling Han wasn't afraid, but this overwhelming freak was at least a 5th extreme by now. If they really came to blows, there was absolutely no way he could be a match, because Hong Tianbu was also a prodigy that could challenge those at a higher cultivation level. His battle prowess was comparable to the inscription tier. Ling Han didn't think that he could rival inscription tier elites. At least, he couldn't accomplish that when he was only in blood transformation tier. He definitely had to improve his cultivation level as soon as possible. Even if he couldn't defeat Hong Tianbu, he had to at least deal with Fang Zipping first. However, cultivation had to be progressed slowly and steadily. How could one possibly advance by leaps and bounds without a special fated opportunity? If some ancient site opens up and I obtain some treasures, I can solve the problem. He hoped that Xianxia would come and would provide him with another chance to go to some ancient site. However, he was disappointed. Xianxia seemed to have disappeared. After a few days, Ling Han finally found out that Xianxia and the others had all begun to break through to extreme bone tier. Previously, Ling Han and Hong Tianliang's performance in the hunting tournament had been too shocking, seriously provoking these people. Thus, they could no longer hold themselves back, and began to break through. Ling Han pondered for a moment. Since he couldn't go to an ancient site, he might as well change his direction. He had only obtained 2 ingredients for the antidote for the soul-departing pill. He would find the remaining 6. At present, he did not lack money at all. Anything that could be solved with money was no big deal. After posting the deal on the platform, Ling Han soon received news that someone had 1,000 leaves and wanted to make a deal with him. However, the other party raised the price by 2-fold. It was true that Ling Han had a lot of money, but he was no fool. He bargained with the other party, and finally reached a deal with a price of 5 million. This time, Ling Han didn't encounter any con men, successfully completing the deal. Another few days passed, and he obtained clues about the 4th ingredient. The other party quoted a price of 7 million, and they bargained for a long time. However, the other party gritted his teeth and refused to relent. Ling Han didn't plan to waste time, so he took the offer. He was halfway done. Ling Han's luck attribute seemed to have taken effect. Very soon, he had obtained the clue of the 5th ingredient, and he had also completed a breakthrough, and that was he had finally unraveled the secret of the circular plate. D. A message came from the optical computer, but Ling Han didn't have the time to care about it. He arrived at the small forest and tossed the circular plate onto the ground. Then, he activated it with his spiritual power. There was clearly no change, but Ling Han saw clearly that the formation had formed. He caught a wild boar and threw it into the area enshrouded by the formation. The wild boar did not sense anything at all. The moment it broke free from the suppression, it immediately wanted to flee. It had already been completely frightened by Ling Han's strength. However, just as its foot moved, an ice arrow arrived. It had reached at least 6 times the speed of sound, so how could it be dodged by a wild boar? When the arrow hit its target, it immediately turned into a block of ice. The high-level energy mobilized is at least a dozen times more than mine, Ling Han murmured. He could already use spiritual power to communicate with high-level energy, so he naturally could also determine the range of the formation. He couldn't help but feel fortunate again. At that time, those troublemakers hadn't been able to fully unleash the formation's power. Otherwise, he would have been very passive at that time. This should have the power of inscription tier. However, I have a purple pendant that can neutralize a portion of the formation's might, as well as the essence nurturing gourd. At most, I'll only be in a bit of a sorry state. Ling Han shut down the formation and held the circular disc in his hand. Since formations could also have the effect of communicating with high-level energy, then was it a kind of spirit diagram by itself? Ling Han studied formation patterns, wanting to use them for his own use. However, after half a day, he had no choice but to shake his head. Humans and formations were different, and there was no possibility of learning from them through reference. He returned to his room. He had long since switched to a new one. Then, he turned on the optical computer. Previously, someone seemed to have sent him a message. Looking at it, Ling Han couldn't help but smile. Someone had contacted him again, and there was the 5th ingredient he needed, the white scorching stone. He was just about to send a message to the other party, when he suddenly felt an uncomfortable feeling, and immediately turned around. A figure slid in through the window. When he saw Ling Han turn around, that person couldn't help but feel surprised, and said, "Brat, your reactions are getting more and more agile." Old Man Chang, the old bastard who had drugged Ling Han. In the previous 2 times, this old man gave Ling Han a powerful pressure of invincibility. But the 3rd time they met, Ling Han finally discovered that this old man was only as strong as Fang Zipping. In a head-on confrontation, Ling Han was definitely no match for him. Even if he used the flying sword, Ling Han still felt that his chances of winning were extremely slim. However, since Old Man Chang insisted on coming at this time, it was he that was taking the initiative to seek death. There was no other reason. Ling Han had grasped the secret of the circular disc and could channel an inscription tier-level formation. Even an extreme bone tier wouldn't be able to withstand it. Of course, the prerequisite was that Old Man Chang would step into the trap. Ling Han chuckled. He knew that there was definitely a colossal force behind Old Man Chang, which could easily launch a beast tide to destroy a city. However, he now had Chun Fengyan's imperial sword copyright. Even someone as powerful as the demonic rat was no match for him, so what was this force worth? Moreover, this force had committed such a massacre, so Chun Fengyan would definitely fly into a thunderous rage when he found out. "Thank you for the compliment," Ling Han said calmly. "Brat, it's time for you to perform meritorious service," Old Man Chang said with a smile. "My lord is very interested in your alchemy ability, so he ordered me to bring you back. In the future, you'll be responsible for concocting alchemical pills, and there will be no lack of benefits for you." Ling Han thought for a moment, then said, "I want the antidote for the soul-departing pill. Gagaga, as long as you do your best for Master, I will naturally give you the antidote," Old Man Chang said. Ling Han shook his head. "I want it now." Old Man Chang couldn't help but stare at Ling Han, revealing a baleful expression as he said, "Brat, do you think you're qualified to put on airs in front of me, just because you won first place in the hunting competition? You people are deranged. For the sake of obtaining the blood divine crystal, you did not hesitate to use humans to feed demonic beasts. I have only killed an animal, yet you have set your eyes on me, and even forced me to take poison," Ling Han said calmly, but his tone was extremely harsh. "And now, you still want me to work for you?" Old Man Chang was first shocked, then bared his mouth in a strange grin and said, "Brat, you are indeed very stubborn. No wonder you offended even Hong Tianbu. However, it is not up to you today. Since Master has spoken, I will bring you back no matter what." He moved aggressively. With his cultivation level of 5th extreme, he was sure that Ling Han wouldn't even be able to withstand a single move from him. No one would be alerted at all. Ling Han retreated. Pong! He had already broken through the window and exited. Shuttle steps was activated, and he similarly possessed 2 times the speed of sound. And Old Man Chang was startled. He had not thought that a blood transformation tier cultivator could actually exert such high speed, but without the slightest hesitation, he immediately set off in pursuit of Ling Han. He was very certain, because Ling Han did not run towards the center of the academy. Instead, he was charging towards the outside of the academy. If he went out further, there would be a dense forest, as well as a boundless mountain forest. If a battle broke out there, no matter how big the commotion was, it would be very difficult to draw attention. What more, when once he had the chance to make his move, he guaranteed that he would be able to take down Ling Han with a single move. His speed was extremely fast. The 2 of them, one in front and one behind, soon entered into the dense forest. "Brat, you won't be able to escape. You had best follow me obediently," Old Man Chang said as he gave chase. "Master is someone who's going to start a great business in the future, so you won't feel aggrieved if you follow Master. Start your sister's business. Are deranged people worthy of talking about conquering the world?" Ling Han said coldly. Old Man Chang found this strange. Where did Ling Han get his confidence from? He had clearly been poisoned by the soul-departing pill, so how did he dare to resist? If there was no antidote, this brat would only be able to live for more than half a year. Why had he suddenly exploded? However, this thought only flashed through his mind before disappearing. Since his lord said that he was to bring Ling Han back, he didn't have to care about anything else. He just had to bring Ling Han back. "Brat, you won't be able to escape," the old geezer said coldly. He was slightly irritated. He hadn't been able to capture a mere blood transformation tier even after such a long time. This was embarrassing. "Old bastard!" Ling Han waved his hand, and the flying sword shot out. "Petty tricks!" Old Man Chang casually swatted with his hand, instantly sending the flying sword flying. Ling Han threw another sword, This time, he used Sword Dao, and under its frenzied activation, the flying sword suddenly soared to more than 4 times the speed of sound. Like a streak of light, it shot towards Old Man Chung. Old Man Chung saw Ling Han take out a second small sword, and was naturally filled with disdain. You already failed the first time, so it is naturally even more impossible for you to succeed the second time. Precisely because he had seen what move Ling Han had used, he had naturally underestimated him. However, after Ling Han's sword strike flew out, he finally knew that he had been overwhelmingly wrong. Most importantly, he was also chasing Ling Han at twice the speed of sound. What kind of concept was that? It was equivalent to the flying sword flying at 6 times the speed of sound while he was in a state of stillness. He was shocked, and hurriedly covered his face with his hands. Then he tilted his head, dodging with all his might. Pooh! The flying sword pierced through his fingers and stabbed into his face, instantly causing blood to flow. Old Man Chung was both furious and shocked. Though he had dodged and protected his vital points, this sword still pierced into his cheek, like a fish that had its cheek pierced by a straw rope. A blood transformation tier cultivator was actually able to accelerate a flying sword to such a speed? He was internally stunned. This was the first time that he felt wariness towards a blood transformation tier, but more than that, he was furious. This was a great humiliation. However, in the next instant, his expression changed drastically. A terrifying chill assaulted, and an ice arrow shot over from one side at an indescribable speed. It was practically the attack of an inscription tier. However, where did this inscription tier martial artist come from? He wanted to dodge, but in this state, how was he supposed to dodge or parry? He forcefully threw a punch, which landed on the ice arrow and shattered it with a paw. This also showed how strong he was. Otherwise, he would not have been able to hit it at all. However, the might of the ice arrow was not power in the first place, but rather the bone-piercing coldness. Visibly, Old Man Cheng's hand immediately froze over, and it was still spreading towards his arm. This wasn't the most fatal thing because there was a second arrow, a third, even more arrows of ice shot towards the old geezer. Old Man Cheng was completely unable to dodge. With his right hand frozen, it seriously affected the flow of his blood, and he couldn't release any power at all. This was an attack on the level of a martial artist in inscription tier. Pu, Piu, Piu. He was continuously hit by the arrows, and multiple patches of ice appeared on his body. Ling Han breathed a sigh of relief, a hint of satisfaction on his face. Shooting the first flying sword was naturally a deliberate misdirection, and the second flying sword was similarly a deception. The real killing move was when Old Man Chang used his arms to protect himself, and Ling Han took the chance to throw out the circular plate. So Old Man Chang didn't discover it at all. Thus, after Old Man Chang dispelled the attack of the flying sword, he naturally stepped into the formation. What a perfect plan. Ling Han opened his mouth and said, "Tell me who your master is." Old Man Chang revealed a tragic expression. He had not thought that he, an elite of extreme bone tier, would actually be played around in Ling Han's hands. "In your dreams, I definitely won't betray my lord," he said. "Moreover, you won't live for long either. My lord definitely won't spare you." Hee hee. Ling Han chuckled and suddenly said, "Say, if I suddenly changed my mind and was willing to side with your master, would your master kill me to avenge you?" Old Man Chang couldn't help but feel stifled. How could he not know his master's personality? He was a peerless, ruthless character, so what was the life of a subordinate worth? For the sake of his great undertaking, everything could be sacrificed. Thus, it was really possible that he would have died for nothing. "Don't think you can sway my will," the old geezer said. However, even his voice was trembling. It wasn't that he was afraid, but rather that the coldness was invading his body, causing him to involuntarily shiver. "Then you can go on your way," Ling Han said calmly. "Don't worry. Not too long after, I'll send your master to hell as well, so that you can reunite." This force was deranged, and had launched a beast tide to massacre a city. Ling Han didn't mind finding the culprit and bringing him to justice. "Ha ha ha ha. You have no idea how powerful our lord is. You are merely seeking your own demise, Old Man Chung said. However, the coldness had already invaded his heart, lungs, and brain. His voice was extremely low and unclear. Go to hell. Ling Han humphed. At first, he had wanted to feign civility with the old geezer for a while longer. But this time, Old Man Chung wanted to take him away, lock him up and make him a full-time alchemist, and Ling Han couldn't tolerate that. Cultivating in seclusion wasn't the same as disregarding the outside world. Although Ling Han still had some vermilion fruits in his possession, there were only enough to send him into the third change. What about fourth change and fifth change? Where would he get the treasured fruits of life from? Was he hoping that his lord would bestow it on him? Ling Han dug a hole and buried Old Man Chung. Of course, he searched Old Man Cheng's body first, but he didn't find any useful clues. He couldn't figure out the old man's identity. After some thought, Ling Han still took a photo of the old geezer, planning to ask about him on the online platform. He put away the disc and the flying sword and returned to his quarters. After making this decision and killing Old Man Chung, Ling Han felt his whole body relax. Previously, he had always felt that there was something suppressing him. Now realization dawned on him. What was being suppressed was his longing for freedom. Even if it was only feigning civility, it had still unknowingly affected him. Now, Ling Han felt completely relaxed, and when he thought about problems, he felt his thought processes had become smoother. This is the real me, he murmured. He uploaded Old Man Cheng's photo onto the web, offering rewards for any information. Of course, he used false personal information, and at the same time, he went to communicate with the seller of the white scorching stone. The two of them quickly reached an agreement on the price. Not long after ending their conversation, Ling Han received another message. As it turned out, there was an answer to his query about Old Man Chung. Someone replied that Old Man Cheng's name was Chong Hu, and he was around 90 years old. He had a violent and bloodthirsty personality, and he had suddenly disappeared more than 30 years ago. At first, they had thought that he had been annihilated by the Majestic Empire's army. But there would be occasional news of this person's appearance. However, because there was no solid evidence, they thought that it was just a rumor. Ling Han agreed with this answer. He paid the information fee. Unfortunately, though he had confirmed Old Man Cheng's identity, he still didn't know who he was working for. One day he would find out because after Chung Hu died, the force behind him would definitely not give up just like that, and would mobilize others to deal with him. Chung Hu is a fifth extreme, so if anyone else comes, there'll definitely be a stronger fifth extreme, or even inscription tier. However, inscription tier shouldn't be possible. There are only so many in this world, unless the heaven and earth's environment suddenly changes, causing the level of being to soar even more fiercely. Aside from Fong Zipping and an unknown fifth extreme, I still have to face Hong Tianbu and that powerful force. I don't think I've done anything to anger the gods or anger the people. Why have I made so many enemies? And this was still the biggest threat. Additionally, there were those such as Feng Ruoxian, Hu Yang and so on that had not been taken into account. Otherwise, there would be even more. Another few days passed, and Ling Han had already gathered 7 ingredients. He was only a sliver away from concocting the antidote for the soul-departing pill. This 8th ingredient was called Bei Lan Poisonous Sprout. Ling Han had already hung out his request for information for a good many days. 3 days later, someone contacted him and said that though he did not have this kind of ingredient, he knew where it was growing, but this clue naturally had to be sold for money. Ling Han paid 10,000 Dark North coins for the location of where the Bei Lan Poisonous Sprout was growing. This was in a forest of the Dome Mountains, but it was not easy to enter. It was covered with poisonous miasma, so there was no need to insist on going. No one would enter into that damn place. This concerned his own life, so Ling Han naturally decided to go. However, after some thought, he decided to settle another matter while he was at it. On the second day, he went to the Formations Association for certification as a high-level formation master. After unraveling the mystery of the circular plate, Ling Han's strength in formations also improved by leaps and bounds, enough to advance into the ranks of high-level formation masters. This naturally made Chun Hao extremely happy, and he personally came to witness this. In the end, he naturally passed the test successfully. Ling Han obtained the qualification to become a high-level formation master, and he immediately had someone call Yan Jun over. With the command of a high-level formation master, did Yan Jun dare not to come? Not long after, Yan Jun appeared in the room. "Greetings, Grandmaster Ling," Yan Jun said forcibly. Previously, when Ling Han was still a middle-level formation master, he still had a sliver of hope to surpass this opponent, but now he had lost all hope. The gap was too wide. There was absolutely no hope. Ling Han didn't even raise his head, and said, "I want to go to Dome Mountains, so you can go with me." When Yan Jun heard this, he immediately shivered, and said subconsciously, "I'm not going." Ling Han was reading through the secret records of formations. Chun Hao was extremely impressed with him, and practically allowed him access to all the formations available. When he heard this, he put down the secret records and said calmly, "If I tell you to go, what right do you have to refuse?" Yan Jun finally understood. Ling Han was going to call him to account, so how could he dare to leave the Imperial City? In fact, he didn't even dare to leave the Formation Masters Association. Now, he was going to go to the Dome Mountains with Ling Han. Wasn't that just courting death? Naturally, he was determined not to comply. "I have something on," he declared, his head held high. Ling Han smiled. "What could be more important than a high-level formation master? Don't you know the rules?" He moved directly, grabbing Yan Jun and forcibly dragging him outside. How could Yan Jun be a match for him? He could only struggle and shout with all his might. He didn't believe that Ling Han could do anything to him in the Formation Masters Association. On their way out, their loud commotion naturally attracted the attention of a great many people. Ling Han merely smiled and said, "I plan to bring him for a training trip and personally guide him. I never thought that he would be so resistant. No, he's using his public office to avenge a private grudge. He wants to kill me." Yan Jun shouted loudly. Though it was a serious crime to talk back to or even slander a high-level formation master, but compared to his life, he couldn't care less. Ling Han merely chuckled and said, "Youngsters really can't take hardship, actually finding such an excuse." Others expressed their deep agreement. Even if Ling Han looked much younger than Yan Jun, who asked him to be a high-level formation master. When others saw him, they would automatically imagine that he was one of those white-bearded old men. As they saw it, was there any need for Ling Han to harm a minor formation master like this? There were plenty of ways to make your life a living hell. Youngsters nowadays were really spoiled rotten. There was a high-level formation master willing to teach him one-on-one, but he was actually so stubborn. Yan Jun screamed all the way, yet he was still dragged out of the Formation Masters Association. Looking at the Formation Masters Association building getting farther and farther away, Yan Jun naturally lost all hope. He stopped struggling and allowed Ling Han to drag him away. Ling Han called for a car, stuffed Yan Jun inside, and headed out of the city. In the first place, the Formation Masters Association was located at the edge of the city. However, the Dome Mountain was located in the direction of the city's Dragon's Head, so they could still travel by car for some distance. However, the Dragon's Head was where the Imperial Palace was located, so the car naturally stopped at a far distance. Ling Han dragged Yan Jun down from the car. They circled around the Imperial Palace, then headed north. Night soon fell. Ling Han stopped and began to prepare food. Yan Jun sat quietly at the side. After a while, he opened his mouth and said, "Ling Han, don't have any malicious intentions towards me, because I have already turned on the optical computer, and it is constantly recording. If you want to kill me, don't even think of escaping." Ling Han couldn't help but smile, and said, "You really know how to flatter yourself." In a short while, the meat had been roasted, and he began eating. Yan Jun watched from the sidelines, and couldn't help but feel surprised. "Where's mine?" "You?" Ling Han shook his head and said, "In order to prevent you from suddenly dying and saying that I was the one who poisoned you to death, you had best bear with it." "You?" Yan Jun pointed angrily at Ling Han. Ling Han frowned and said, "Don't you know the rules? A mere elementary-level formation master actually dares to shout at me?" Yan Jun was instantly rendered speechless. If Ling Han had just dragged him out with his overwhelming power, then he naturally could point at Ling Han's nose and curse. The problem was, the latter was a high-level formation master, and was someone he had to treat with utmost respect. "The punishment is that you won't be able to eat today," Ling Han said coldly. "Fuck. Are you using your public office to avenge a private grudge?" Yan Jun was gritting his teeth in anger, but the optical computer recorded it very clearly. He had indeed shouted at Ling Han. Even if there were 10 people who saw this, it was guaranteed that no one would be on his side. Endure, 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 he thought. As long as he could ensure his life, anything was negotiable. Ling Han quickly finished the meat, then leaned against a tree root to take a nap. Yan Jun soon became thirsty and hungry, and it was hard to resist. He continuously twisted and turned, unable to fall asleep no matter what. Ling Han, Ling Han, Ling Han, Ling Han. Who knew how many times he had cursed in his heart? Why had he encountered such a bringer of misfortune? Yet he did not reflect on himself at all. At the time, it was he who had taken the initiative to provoke Ling Han, and it was also he who had gone to hire an assassin to commit murder. Now, he was actually resenting Ling Han. His behavior was really extremely ugly. After an unknown amount of time, he finally fell asleep in a daze. Ling Han unleashed a gust of wind from his finger. Pa! Yan Jun was knocked unconscious, and Ling Han entered the essence nurturing gourd. Whether Yan Jun would be bitten to death by wild beasts in the future would not be within Ling Han's consideration. Ling Han absorbed energy from the essence nurturing gourd, improving his physique in all aspects. His spiritual power was also growing healthily. At present, it could be raised to the same height as his mystical power, and in fact, it was even more important. The next morning, as if there was an alarm clock, Ling Han suddenly woke up. He exited the gourd, and saw that the sun was only a sliver away from rising. He glanced over, only to see that Yan Jun was completely unscathed. TSK, why wasn't there any wild beast that ate him? Ling Han sat down in a cross-legged position, and began to cultivate, plucking the power of heaven and earth to nourish himself. Half an hour later, Ling Han was done. Then, he took out some meat to barbecue. It was about time, and Yan Jun woke up slowly after smelling the aroma of the meat. When he saw that the sky was already bright, he couldn't help but feel surprised. How could he sleep so well? Garuru, his stomach couldn't help but rumble. He hadn't eaten all night, and now that he smelled the aroma, he was even hungrier. He greedily looked at the meat on the fire, his saliva overflowing. He felt an urge to rush up and snatch it. However, he knew that this was seeking his own humiliation. It wasn't long before Ling Han roasted the meat and started to eat. Yan Jun knew very well that it was impossible to ask Ling Han for food. Thus, he decided to simply rely on himself and planned to hunt some prey himself. "Sit down." Ling Han stretched out a hand and pressed down. Yan Jun was unable to move. "Ling Han!" Yan Jun called out. Ling Han's expression darkened. "Pa!" He slapped him across the face, saying, "On the basis that we're from the same city, I won't lower myself to your level. However, you've repeatedly called me by my name. You're far too disrespectful." This slap was very solid, causing Yan Jun to become dizzy. However, what Yan Jun felt worse was in his heart this guy was clearly abusing him and not giving him anything to eat, but he actually said it so righteously and matter-of-factly. It became Yan Jun that was in the wrong, so how could he not explode in anger? However, it was also his fault. Why did he have to call Ling Han's name directly? He still couldn't accept the fact that Ling Han had become a high-level formation master. He kept thinking that Ling Han had only been a country bumpkin from a remote town at that time, but now Ling Han was superior to him. He couldn't help but feel unable to accept that. "Grandmaster Ling, I want to hunt by myself," he said through gritted teeth. Because he had the optical computer recording, he had to make himself impeccable. Ling Han shook his head and said, "No, it's too dangerous. Since I've brought you out, I naturally have to be responsible for your safety." "Fuck, what danger?" This place was close to the imperial capital, and the more powerful demonic beasts would have long since been eliminated. Yan Jun was driven mad again. Could it be that you want to starve me to death? Thinking of this possibility, he couldn't help but shiver. This was too cruel. Ling Han let out a burp, rubbed his stomach, and said, "So full, so full." Yan Jun felt like crying. Then what about him? Here. Ling Han tossed over a bone that he had just chewed on. "Eat." Yan Jun was taken aback, and then fire was about to come out of his eyes. "Bones, you actually made me eat bones? Are you treating me like a dog? Ling Han, you've gone too far." "Pa!" He had not even finished his words when Ling Han gave him a resounding slap. "Don't seek death," Ling Han said balefully. Offending one's superior was a great taboo. Yan Jun's heart clenched. If he really couldn't control his mouth, then even if he was killed by Ling Han, he would have died for nothing. "Since you're not eating, let's go." Ling Han patted off the dust from his behind and strode forwards. Yan Jun had no choice but to follow. However, his gaze involuntarily paused on that bone. There seemed to still be some meat on it. He was very hungry. After walking for an entire morning, Ling Han finally stopped to rest and grab a bite to eat. Yan Jun was already so hungry that he was blinking his eyes to clear his blurred vision. Cultivators had a very high demand for food, and this was already the third meal that he had not eaten. His hunger had reached an unbearable level. He knew that Ling Han wouldn't let him leave, so he naturally didn't bring up the topic of him going off to hunt by himself anymore. However, his gaze became more and more venomous. Ling Han saw this, yet he was completely unconcerned. Under the suppression of strength, did he need to care about Yan Jun's thoughts? Of course, he had done it on purpose. Previously, Yan Jun had targeted him for no reason, and even hired an assassin. Why hadn't he thought that he was going too far at that time? Thus, this was a sin that he had committed, so he would have to bear the consequences himself. After Ling Han finished eating, he tossed a bone over as usual. Yan Jun was still very unyielding and didn't pick it up. However, before he left, his gaze paused on the bone for a few more seconds. He continued his journey in a passive manner. In any case, he was already out of energy. Ling Han smiled and picked him up. With his current power, the weight of a person was completely no issue. When they stopped again at night, Yan Jun's gaze had changed completely. If an ordinary person didn't eat for a day, they might only feel dizzy and have blurry vision, Illinois. However, it was a different story for cultivators. That kind of strong desire for food was incredibly strong. He wanted to eat, he definitely had to eat. Thus, when Ling Han tossed down a bone, he himself darted out, grabbed it, and chewed madly on it. When he almost chewed up the bones and swallowed them down into his stomach, Ling Han asked in surprise, "What are you doing?" Yan Jun's eyes were still bloodshot. He was still hungry. "Why do you have to eat the bones that others have left behind? Isn't there meat here?" Ling Han pointed at a piece of meat that was placed on the fire. What? Yan Jun was a little dazed as he looked at Ling Han. "I was just joking with you before. Do you think that with my identity, I would make things difficult for a mere elementary-level formation master like you?" Ling Han said with a smile. Yan Junyan almost spat out a mouthful of blood. "Just joking? How could you joke like this? You starved me for a day and a night, and you actually call it a joke?" He wasn't stupid, and he knew that Ling Han had done this on purpose. When he went crazy from hunger, and even chewed on the leftover bones, Ling Han would say this. This was toying with him. Not only was it torturing his body, but it was also torturing his mind and willpower. Yan Jun felt extremely humiliated. When had he ever been treated like this before? Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! He swore that if he had the chance, he would kill Ling Han at all costs. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Since you've already eaten, don't waste it." He picked up another piece of meat and began to gnaw on it. Yan Jun felt a strong urge to commit murder. He had indeed eaten it, but there was only that little bit of meat in the bones, so how could it possibly be enough? "Have a good rest. We still have to travel tomorrow," Ling Han said. Pa, he slapped Yan Jun unconscious. A night passed, and when Yan Jun woke up, Ling Han had already finished cultivating. Smelling the aroma of the meat, this guy's stomach growled like thunder. Right now, he was so hungry that he wanted to kill someone. As the saying goes, humans die for wealth and birds die for food. Now, for the sake of food, even if an elite of inscription tier stood in front of him, he would still dare to rush up and snatch the food from him. Ling Han cracked a smile. He didn't want to starve Yan Jun to death either. That way, he wouldn't be able to escape the consequences either. He kept Yan Jun hanging, not letting him eat to fullness, nor letting him starve to death. When they arrived at Dome Mountains, Yan Jun had already lost a lot of weight. Grandmaster Ling, I will remember this kindness, Yan Jun said through gritted teeth. On this journey, in order to dispel his feeling of hunger, he had not only chewed on the bones that Ling Han had left behind, he had also eaten a considerable amount of wild grass. To him, this was a grudge that he would never forget for the rest of his life. But he understood. As long as he was still alive, that would be the best revenge. Thus, no matter what, he had to survive. Ling Han patted his shoulder and said, "Don't take it to heart. It is my duty to guide and support young people. Guide your sister." Yan Jun grumbled internally, but of course, he couldn't say it out loud. Dome Mountains wasn't a dangerous place, and there were few powerful demonic beasts here. Although there were also some precious medicinal ingredients, because of the dense poisonous miasma, few people came here. The reason was very simple. To enter into this space, one would have to take the 100 neutralization pill, and just how expensive was the 100 neutralization pill? The medicinal ingredients that could be harvested would just be enough to offset the expenditure of the 100 neutralization pill, or be even less than that, so who would be willing to do it? However, this naturally wasn't a problem for Ling Han. He himself knew how to concoct the 100 neutralization pill, and even if he didn't, it would be a piece of cake for him with his wealth. Ling Han took out a pill bottle and tossed it over to Yan Jun. He said, "This is the 100 neutralization pill, which can cure miasma poison." Yan Jun naturally didn't want to go in, but he also knew that he couldn't disobey Ling Han. So he could only take the pill bottle and swallow an alchemical pill. He wasn't afraid that Ling Han would give him fake medicine because the optical computer was recording, and the images would be uploaded at the same time of the recording. Even if the optical computer was smashed, there would still be a backup in the imperial capital. The two of them entered into the forest. This poisonous miasma had a physical form, and could be seen with the naked eye. It was rising like clouds and mists, swirling around them. There were no animals here, and even demonic beasts couldn't survive here. However, there were some special trees, flowers, and plants that were especially lush, reaching dozens of meters in height. Their crowns spread open, covering the sky and sun. Added with the miasma, this place appeared even darker. The sun was clearly shining brightly, but this place was completely dusky. Ling Han walked towards the northwest. According to the information, Balon poisonous sprout was growing by the side of a pool in that direction. This place was quiet, and there were no roars of beasts or cries of insects. It was as if it was an absolute land of death. The 100 neutralization pill couldn't last for too long either. After about an hour, the medicinal effects were exhausted, and he needed to take another pill. 3 hours later, they finally arrived near that pool of water. This pool wasn't small, and it was oval-shaped. At its longest, it was about 9 meters, and the narrowest was more than 6 meters. The pool water was pitch black, and bubbles would occasionally appear. With a "pa," they exploded, and a wisp of gas rose into the air. Was this the source of the miasma? Here, the poisonous miasma was obviously even more intense, speeding up the consumption of the 100 neutralization pill. Ling Han's eyes swept over the surroundings, and he had already discovered Balon poisonous sprout by the side of the pool. This was a very strange-looking plant. It looked a little like a bean sprout with green leaves that were thick. Ling Han was extremely careful. After putting on gloves, he went to pluck it. This was because the Balon poisonous sprout had the word poison in its name. In reality, it was also extremely poisonous. He drew the Balon poisonous sprout into the essence-nurturing gourd, and a relaxed expression appeared on his face. Now that the 8 medicinal ingredients were all prepared, the soul-departing pill could no longer trouble him. Yan Jun watched from the sidelines, and couldn't help but look surprised. Why had a herb suddenly disappeared? This is called the Essence Nurturing Gourd. It's a spatial tool and can also strengthen one's spiritual power, Ling Han explained. Spatial tool. Yan Jun naturally knew what this was. According to historical records, the spatial tools of the civilization of the last era had all been created by formation masters. But now, there was not a single formation master that could forge a spatial tool. They did not have the skill at all. He was first envious, then shocked. Why did Ling Han tell him such a secret? Could it be that he was planning to kill him to keep him from leaking the secret? Moreover, it could nurture and strengthen one's spiritual power. Yan Jun finally understood why Ling Han could surpass him and become a high-level formation master. It was because he had the Essence Nurturing Gourd. If he could also possess such a treasure, then he would definitely be able to become a high-level formation master as well, or even higher than that. You're overthinking things, Ling Han said with a chuckle. Studying formations requires natural talent, and as for you, you're clearly far too inferior. This was blatant disdain. Yan Jun gritted his teeth in anger. He swore that when he returned to the imperial capital, he would definitely publicize the fact that Ling Han possessed the Essence Nurturing Gourd, to the point that even a 3-year-old child would have to know about this. Countless people would covet this kind of treasure. Unless Ling Han was willing to give it up, he would definitely die a mysterious death. Are you wondering why I have to let you know such a big secret? Ling Han asked with a smile. You are too conceited, Yan Jun said. Ling Han cracked a smile. I am confident, but I am definitely not conceited. Pride is a very bad habit. So how could I possibly make such a big mistake? Then why are you doing this? Yan Jun asked curiously. Because I'm tired of playing around and plan to kill you. Thus, even if you know some secrets, I won't care, Ling Han said with a smile. Ha! Yan Jun sneered. Although you're a high-level formation master, I didn't make any mistakes. If you dare to kill me, don't even think of escaping. Ling Han was astonished and he said, Who said that I killed you? You were the one who tripped and fell into the pond, and I couldn't save you in time. Are you lying through your teeth? Yan Jun waved the optical computer on his wrist. These are all recorded and have been simultaneously transmitted to the imperial capital. Ling Han smiled faintly and asked, What gives you such confidence in the network here? When Yan Jun heard this, he couldn't help but feel his expression change drastically. He tried to use the optical computer to connect to the network, but there was no reaction at all. In the area around the imperial capital, the infrastructure is indeed much better than Huju City. However, it is not so good that there would be additional relay devices in this kind of dead place. Ling Han said slowly. Yan Jun knew that things were not good, and cold sweat dripped down his forehead. So, don't be too confident. Ling Han patted Yan Jun's shoulder. Yan Jun shivered. He finally knew fear now. If he died here, as long as his optical computer was destroyed, no one would know the truth, and Ling Han would be able to go unpunished. You can't do this, he roared. Ling Han said calmly, Why can't I? You are allowed to hire assassins, and I am not allowed to take revenge. What do you mean by hiring assassins? You're spouting nonsense. Yan Jun hurriedly shook his head. That's not very nice of you. I have already openly declared that I want to kill you. Yet you don't even have the courage to admit the truth. Ling Han sighed. Yan Jun would never admit it. In this way, he would still have a sliver of a chance to live and said, Ling Han, you really should not misunderstand. It is not what you think it is. It is completely Yang Ziqing's own decision. Didn't you also hear it with your own ears at Miss Feng's birthday banquet? Yang Ziqing admitted it himself. Ling Han shook his head and said with a smile, If Yang Ziqing had a spirit after death, he would probably jump out of his casket in fury. Ling Han, believe me, really that was completely Yang Ziqing's business. I had completely no idea. Yan Jun was still lying through his teeth. Ling Han smiled and said, I wasn't the one who pushed you down either. What? Yan Jun was taken aback. These words came completely out of nowhere and there was no sense to them. However, in the next instant, he discovered that he had been sent flying. With a pang, he fell into the water. Only now did he understand what Ling Han's words meant. However, he was immediately scared out of his wits. This was a poisonous pool, and the poisonous fog in the entire forest was exuding from here. Even standing on the sidelines, the consumption rate of the 100 neutralization pill was astonishingly fast, let alone falling into it. He hurriedly struggled and swam towards the shore, feeling great pain all over his body. The poison entered his body, causing his skin to immediately begin to rot. But when he swam to the bank, what greeted him was a foot. Tong, this merciless kick immediately sent him flying backwards. Yen Jun brandished his hands with all his might. When this poison invaded his body, it was not only fatal, but also incredibly painful. Ling Han was expressionless. From the moment Yen Jun hired assassins, he was no longer worthy of sympathy. Ling Han, I curse you. You will die a horrible death, and you will be even worse off than me. One day, you will be dealt with, Yen Jun roared. He knew that Ling Han would definitely not spare him, so he threw caution to the wind. At least, he could vent his anger with a bit of cursing. Ling Han ignored him. He looked at the center of the pool, because he discovered that there was a whirlpool there. And in the whirlpool, there was a black object that was exuding a powerful aura of life. Could it be that this is the source of all poisons? His heart skipped a beat. A lot of information could be found in the academy, and among them there was an introduction to the source of all poisons. The so-called source of all poisons could only be produced in this kind of poisonous land. This was extremely poisonous. However, when things reached the extreme, the opposite would happen. It was the same for the source of all poisons. The end of the poison was the source of life. Thus, the source of all poisons was an astonishingly valuable treasure for cultivators. The conditions for the formation of the source of all poisons were harsh. It had to be extremely poisonous, and at the same time it had to take a very long time, just like how heaven and earth nurtured treasured fruits. No matter what, it had to take hundreds or even thousands of years. Ling Han believed that there was definitely no source of all poisons here not too long ago. Otherwise, there would constantly be people coming to try their luck. His luck was off the charts. He had come to harvest the Beilan poisonous sprout. However, he had coincidentally come across the source of all poisons forming. Moreover, the source of all poisons was usually hidden. It was impossible to discover it with a single glance. After Ling Han was certain, he couldn't help but laugh loudly, and said, Yen Jun, I really have to thank you this time. If it was not for the fact that he had deliberately brought Yen Jun all the way here on a whim, then he would definitely have left after plucking the Beilan poisonous sprout. It was impossible that he would have discovered that the source of all poisons was hidden within the poisonous waters. Yen Jun only thought that he was being sarcastic, and was only focused cursing. He had realized that he did not have much time left to live. Ling Han was very patient, and explained the source of all poisons to him. When Yen Jun heard this, he almost died from fury. Oh, his death had actually helped Ling Han obtain a great opportunity? No way. He immediately swam towards the center of the pool. He had heard Ling Han say that the source of all poisons was also the source of life, so it would definitely be able to cure his poison, heal his injuries, and even allow him to obtain even more benefits. Ling Han shook his head. How could the source of all poisons be so easily obtained? Ah! Yen Jun screamed in pain. One of his hands had already touched the source of the poison, but in an instant, his whole arm had melted, and not even the bones were left behind. He glared venomously at Ling Han. This guy was actually still trying to trick him. Garuru, he was already too weak to do anything else. His whole person sank into the water. After a few bubbles surfaced, peace had returned to the pool. Yen Jun had died, while Ling Han was completely unfazed. He had not taken this kind of minor character to heart at all. Since he had come to his mind now, he would just kill him. There was no need for him to be overjoyed or anything of the sort. He was observing the strength of the source of all poisons. Every place that could give birth to the source of all poisons was different. For some, even blood transformation tears could obtain it, while some could cause even inscription tears to instantly die. This source of all poisons shouldn't be too strong, because when Yan Junjun came into contact with it, it only corroded one of his arms, and did not immediately turn him into pus. If Yan Jun had known about this after his death, he would probably be cursing again. In the end, he had still been tricked by Ling Han. Let's give it a try. Ling Han ingested 200 neutralization pills and leaped into the pool. Tong. He landed lightly in the pool, where the source of all poisons was located. Instantly, a strong pain assaulted him. The strong poison was presently corroding his skin, wanting to break through and enter his body. Ling Han channeled his mystical power to resist, and added with the toughness of his physique, it was enough to last for a while. He stretched out a hand and grabbed out at the source of all poisons. This was actually a kind of energy, but it was wrapped in strong poison. Without removing the outer layer of protection, it was impossible to obtain any benefits. Break! Ling Han let out a soft exclamation, and his right hand had already clawed through the protection of the source of all poisons. Instantly, a powerful life essence rushed into his body, instantly making his vitality functions become extremely active. The poison was still invading, but under the effects of the source of all poisons, it had become energy that Ling Han could absorb. Everything could be considered energy, and it was only a matter of how they were absorbed. Boom! Ling Han's level of being began to rapidly increase. His life force surged, and practically for every second that passed, he would advance a small step further. When night fell, Ling Han had already advanced his cultivation level to the late stage of the second change. He channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique, continuing to absorb energy and ignoring the feeling of hunger emanating from his body. A night passed, and his cultivation level had reached the peak stage of second change. He jumped out of the pool, and was in no rush to break through. He needed to stabilize his cultivation level. It had not even been a month since he broke through to second change, and now he wanted to advance into third change? It was too fast. If his foundations were unstable, a great problem would appear in the future. Ling Han continued to throw punches, channeling the demonic monkey fists to the extreme. When he threw a punch, the force actually showed signs of turning into a demonic monkey. Hee. So my grasp of the demonic monkey fists can't even be considered beginner level. Ling Han murmured to himself. Brother Monkey had only taught him the fist technique, but didn't explain too much. It was obvious that he wanted him to slowly study it, because what he comprehended like this would truly belong to him. He used up all his power, then recovered and began to cultivate again. Present, he had no one that could match him. He could only practice his fist technique on his own, expending his own power over and over again. 3 days later, he felt that it was about time. In truth, it was still not perfect enough, but he could not give up such a good chance. This source of all poisons could not be taken away. If he came back after some time, it would be letting others have the advantage. He once again leaped into the pool and touched the source of all poisons with his hands and began to break through. The source of all poisons was filled with vitality. This could be considered a different kind of treasured fruit of life, which was enough to support him to complete the leap in his level of being. However, his time in the second change was really too short. Without enough accumulation, it was naturally impossible for him to break through as a matter of course. Instead, he would stumble and advance slowly. After spending a whole 3 days' time, Ling Han finally succeeded in a single step and advanced into third change. Hong, the largest change came from his spiritual power, which suddenly soared to a new height, surging violently in his mind. Phew, this was finally third change. Ling Han stopped. He had to eat something. Previously, in order not to interrupt his inspiration for breaking through, he had not touched any food or drink. Now, he naturally had to eat a good meal. He took out rice from his gourd, started a fire and cooked. These few days, to save him time and effort, he had been eating barbecued meat all this while, and though he loved to eat meat, he was already tired of eating it every day, every meal. After eating, he instantly felt refreshed. All right, I'll continue to cultivate. He jumped back into the poisonous water and absorbed the energy of the source of all poisons to increase his cultivation level. Ling Han spent all his time cultivating, and his cultivation level also shot up. Another 3 days later, he reached the late stage of third change. He could see that the aura exuding from him had turned from pure black to silver. He was only a sliver away from reaching the peak stage of the third change. However, the source of all poisons had also disappeared. If he continued to stay here, he would only be harmed and not benefited at all. Ling Han hurriedly exited the pool. Although he hadn't been able to advance to the fourth change in one go, this was still a good thing. After all, if he forcibly advanced to the fourth change, his foundations would be far too fragile. He needed enough time to improve his physical power, and there was no need to worry about this. He had a large amount of honey from the purple wasps. This was a precious treasure that would help temper his body. It was time to go back. Ling Han returned. This time, he didn't need to bring another person, so his speed was naturally much faster. Furthermore, he had also used the shuttle steps. With double the speed of sound, how fast was this speed? However, after only running for an hour, Ling Han couldn't hold on any longer. The burden was too great. His body was boiling hot, as if it was about to combust. However, compared to the beginning, Ling Han's improvement could be considered astonishing. Was 1 hour of explosive power not enough? Furthermore, as his physique became stronger, this period of time should be able to extend for even longer. He did some calculations. He would need to rest for a few hours before his body could recover and undergo such a heavy expenditure again. 4 days later, Ling Han returned to the imperial capital. He first went to the Formation Masters Association, bringing back the news of Yan Jun's unfortunate death. The death of a formation master naturally had to be investigated closely. From the recordings that Yan Jun had sent back, though Ling Han had been a little harsh on him, it could not be summed up as persecution. Most importantly, after entering into the zone of miasma, the signal would be cut off. With no witnesses, Ling Han could naturally say whatever he wanted. How many people would dare to doubt a high-level formation master? Moreover, this formation master was deeply admired by Chen Hao, and it was even possible that he would surpass Chen Hao in the future. Moreover, Yan Jun had come from Huju City and did not have any important background. Who would be willing to stand up for him? Wouldn't that be a thankless task? The matter was settled just like that. A big matter turned into a small one, and a small matter turned into nothing. Ling Han was only going through the motions and making a record. No one dared to detain him. He returned to the academy and tested his various abilities. The peak value of mystical power was about 3 million kilograms, while physical power was slightly inferior, only 1.5 million or so. And with spiritual power stimulating it, the speed of the flying sword reached 3.7 times the speed of sound, and added with a full-out toss it was 4.7 times. Still can't exceed 5 times, Ling Han sighed. Right now, his conventional power was already no weaker than that of First Extreme. He could completely face a First Extreme head-on, and if he used all kinds of methods at his disposal, it wouldn't be difficult for him to defeat even a Third Extreme. He didn't need to gamble on luck, nor did he need to exert all his effort to make it so that Third Extreme would step into his trap. Ling Han began to concoct the antidote pill for the soul-departing pill. Once the pill was ingested, the strong poison that was constantly bothering him finally disappeared, making his whole body relax, and he felt as if even the speed of cultivation had sped up a bit. Right at this moment, a great event happened in the imperial capital, shaking the whole empire. This was great news. Aside from the Dark North Nation, a powerful force had sent an envoy to the imperial capital. Their initial intention was to seek an audience with the Holy Emperor, but the Holy Emperor had once again begun his seclusion, and the council chairman had received him on his behalf. As it turned out, aside from the Dark North Nation, there was another powerful force. This caused the citizens of the imperial capital to feel surprised. They had initially thought that the Dark North Nation was the overlord of the celestial sea planet. Demonic beasts and the like could only hide deep in the mountains and seas. They had never thought that such a force would suddenly appear. However, what was going on with this force and how strong was it? Coincidentally, Xianxia came to visit him, so Ling Han asked the son of a great general. Xianxia had already broken through to the extreme bone tier. In fact, he could have broken through long ago, and had suppressed his cultivation level for the sake of the Shenyuan gang. However, now that a new member of the Shenyuan clan would soon enter the academy, he could also successfully retreat. He laughed mischievously and said, "You have really asked the right person. Now, only the descendants of the 4 great generals and Grand Tutor Hong would be able to come into contact with this kind of secret. Stop showing off. Hurry up and tell me," Ling Han urged. "That force calls itself the Yu Empire," Shenyuan Dingwa said. "How powerful is it?" Ling Han asked again. "The envoy this time is the son of the Yu Emperor, as well as the descendants of several great generals. According to what I've found out, the son of the Yu Emperor is an elite of the Enlightenment tier," Shenyuan Dingwa whispered, unable to hide his shock. Before the battle with the demonic rat, everyone thought that the Holy Emperor was also an Enlightenment tier, and also the only Enlightenment tier elite of the Dark North Nation. His cultivation level was similar to the cultivation level of the sun, so how could he rival the Yu Emperor? However, to the vast majority of the citizens, in their impression, the Holy Emperor was an existence of Enlightenment tier. Thus, if the information about the envoy from the Yu nation spread out, what kind of massive impact would it cause? Moreover, even though they both had sons, none of Chun Fingyan's descendants had even reached the Enlightenment tier yet. However, his descendant had already reached the Enlightenment tier. With such a comparison, didn't this show that the Emperor of Yu was even more impressive? Then, what does Yu Empire want to do? Ling Han asked. They want to recruit us to become subjects of the Yu Empire. Shenyuan Dingwa spat. They must really be dreaming. Just think about what kind of existence the Holy Emperor is. He's so domineering and heaven-defying. So how can he become someone else's subject? However, the Holy Emperor is presently in seclusion, and even the council chairman dared not make a rash decision. The decision would have to be made after the Holy Emperor comes out of seclusion. Ling Han nodded. This time, the envoy from the Yu Empire had come with ill intentions, and actually wanted to make the Dark North Nation submit to the Yu Empire. They were very ambitious. Furthermore, for such an important matter, only an imperial prince had been sent out, and they did not send out anyone like a great general, which showed how arrogant this Yu Empire was. They were completely not taking the Dark North Nation seriously at all. Upon further thought, in name, the Dark North Nation only had one Enlightenment tier elite, and any random imperial prince they sent out was also an Enlightenment tier elite, which showed how powerful the Yu Empire was, so there was naturally a reason for their arrogance. "Sigh, I don't know if it'll lead to a war between nations," Shenyuan Dingwa said worriedly. Yu Empire's strength was extremely powerful, while Dark North Nation's only invincible existence was Chun Fengyan. He was only one man, and once a full-out battle broke out, it was very likely that both sides would be severely wounded. Shenyuan Dingwa left. He had just broken through, and was in dire need of stabilizing his cultivation level. Ling Han was the same. He was already at the peak stage of the 3rd change. Theoretically, he could already attempt to break through to the 4th change, but he needed actual battle to strengthen his foundations. Where could he participate in actual battle? The Imperial hunting ground was not a bad place. There were extreme bone tier-level demonic beasts, but normally no one was allowed to enter, so this path would not work. Where else could he go? Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. Previously, there were a large number of enemies, such as Fang Zipping and Chang Hu, but why didn't they appear at this time? If he fought more with such elites, his cultivation level would definitely be stabilized very quickly. He could only trouble Shenyuan Dingwa again. Practical battle? Shenyuan Dingwa pondered for a moment. There is indeed such a place, but it's too dangerous. Where? Ling Han asked. The underground arena, Shenyuan Dingwa said. According to the laws of the Majestic Empire, this isn't allowed to exist, so it can only be carried out underground in secret. However, this industry is extremely profitable, and I heard that Hong Tianbu has an underground arena. Oh! Ling Han found this strange and said, Hong Tianbu is also short of money? Shenyuan Dingwa smiled and said, That's right. Although Grand Tutor Hong's salary is quite high, he also has many descendants. Every single person needs a large amount of resources to cultivate. How can it be enough if they don't get some side jobs? Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle and said, Then the 4 great generals should be about the same. right? Hee. Xianxia didn't admit it directly. Instead, he said, every clan will more or less have some black income. In the Majestic Empire, this is considered an open secret. Not only the 4 great generals, but even the various imperial princes are involved, especially those that have the ability to contend for the throne. They have a large number of death warriors under their command. Without a large amount of money to spend, who would follow you? Ling Han nodded and said, then make the arrangements. I'll go to the underground arena to fight. There was no need for him to be reserved with Xianxia. That was because the pill recipes that he had provided had allowed Xianxia to make a great profit. At the same time, his status in the Xianxia clan had also soared, and he owed Ling Han a huge favor. All right, Xianxia nodded, but after some thought, he continued, however, though your cultivation level is not high, your abilities are too strong. It would be difficult to find an opponent that can match you. If it wasn't difficult, I wouldn't have to look for you, right? Ling Han said with a smile. Haha, just because of your words, I'll definitely find someone for you, Xianxia said. He left, and after a mere 2 days, he came to find Ling Han again, and said that everything had been arranged. At night, Ling Han followed him out of the academy, and arrived at a seemingly ordinary bar. However, after passing the inspection, they entered a secret passage, and as they went downwards, everything suddenly became clear. This place was very big, and there was an arena in the middle. Its length and width was about 30 meters, and even such a large arena only occupied 1/5 of the space, which showed how big this place was. Right now, there was an intense battle going on in the arena. However, this was only at the level of Meridian Opening Tier. Ling Han glanced at it before retracting his gaze. This underground arena was very lively, and there were at least over 1,000 people watching the tournament. Furthermore, they did not care that the present battle was only Meridian Opening Tier level. As long as there was blood splattering, it would incite their emotions and cause them to scream in excitement. Xianxia leaned over and whispered, those contestants have all committed serious crimes, and each of them can be sentenced to extreme punishment. Ling Han nodded. Looks like there was still involvement from the army in this underground arena. Otherwise, how could the criminals on death row be brought here? Very soon, the battle on the arena came to an end. It ended with one person's lower abdomen being pierced through, and it would probably be very difficult for him to keep his life. Next, our long victorious champion, Xianxia, versus Ma Jiao, who has been in the limelight recently. A middle-aged man who looked like a host jumped into the arena and shouted at the top of his lungs, now, everyone can place your bets. They could actually place bets? Realization dawned on Ling Han. Merely setting up an underground battle arena and collecting entrance fees could earn some profit, but the majority of it should be spent on the army. Only by starting a gamble and being the banker would one be able to make a lot of money. Even the contestants had been arranged by the tournament authorities, so how easy would it be to cheat? Ling Han smiled and said, there should also be shares of your Xianxia clan in this, right? It was second brother who is our representative. Father should know, but he has never asked before, so he just pretends he doesn't know, Xianxia said with a smile. He now had improved pill recipes, which was equivalent to printing money. He could not be any richer, so he would not be interested in this arena. The 2 new competitors entered the arena. This time, however, it was blood transformation tier level. The battle didn't begin immediately, and everyone was given time to place their bets. The options for placing bets were also varied. For example, how many minutes would the battle take? Would Xianxia be hit in the abdomen? Or would Ma Jiao's foot be injured? It was definitely not just a matter of who would win out of the 2 of them. The stakes for this kind of strange method of betting were very high, but the chances of winning were also very low. It was precisely because of this that the arena could earn money and take advantage of the gambler's mentality of wanting to get instant riches. Ling Han didn't lack money, so he naturally wouldn't place a bet. He was wearing a mask now, and as a disciple of the Imperial Capital Academy, if he were to be exposed for participating in a battle like this, it would mean great trouble. Because Ling Han possessed the battle prowess of extreme bone tier, His battle would also be the climax. The battle between Ma Jiao and Xianxia was extremely intense. The contestants here would only use their surnames as code names, such as Ma E copyright. In future, if another person with the surname Ma came, his name would be Ma Air and so on. Right at this moment, another group of people entered. The one in the lead was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He was dressed in embroidered robes and had a domineering air about him. However, it was as if the few people behind him were esteemed guests. Though he had come in first, the moment he entered, he very eagerly made way for those people behind him. Qin Zhengchu. Shenyuan Dinggua's expression immediately turned ugly when he saw this. In fact, he was gritting his teeth in anger. A descendant of General Vajra? Ling Han asked. N, the 19th son of General Vajra, extremely arrogant, Shenyuan Dinggua said, appearing extremely disdainful. Amongst the many children of General Vajra, this person is the most unbearable. Ling Han smiled and asked, an old grudge? And the grudge is not too light either. Shenyuan Dinggua humphed. Though the two of them looked young, they were both the sons of great generals. Usually, they would be doted on, so it was naturally impossible for them to submit to each other. It was very easy for conflicts to arise. Who are those people? Ling Han looked towards those people behind Din Zhengchu. They were all wearing cloaks over their heads, and one could only tell that they were astonishingly tall, but their appearances could not be seen at all. It was very easy to think that they had all come to participate in the underground tournament, but if it was only contestants, would Qin Zhengchu still be so polite to them? They found seats and sat down. Coincidentally, they were very close to Ling Han and Shenyuan Dinggua. Shenyuan Dinggua, why are you here as well? Qin Zhengchu glanced sideways at Shenyuan Dinggua. It was obvious that he had deliberately found this spot after discovering him. You can come and I can't? What a joke! Shenyuan Dinggua said coldly. The two of them were indeed enemies. The moment they saw each other, they began to argue. This is your new lover? Qin Zhengchu glanced at Ling Han, his tone filled with contempt, directly pouring slander on Ling Han. Qin Zhengchu, your mouth is really despicable. Shenyuan Dinggua humphed. Ha 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 ha. That gay over there Qin Zhengchu said to Ling Han. Come, I'll give you $1 million, and you immediately dump this guy. Ling Han looked towards Qin Zhengchu. Shenyuan Dinggua wasn't wrong. This person really had a despicable mouth. If it wasn't due to General Vajra, he would probably have been hacked to death several hundred times over. It was fine had he not provoked him. He wasn't the type to swallow his anger. To say nothing of Qin Zhengchu, even his old man was someone that Ling Han wanted to defeat. Since he had promised Niu Huaqing, he would definitely have a battle with General Vajra. Apologize. Ling Han stared at Qin Zhengchu and said coldly, Yo, Shenyuan, your new lover is quite hot-tempered. Qin Zhengchu was completely unconcerned and continued to tease him, madly attracting animosity for himself. With a thought from Ling Han, his blood and chi surged, turning into a gigantic silver demonic monkey that pounced towards Qin Zhengchu. How could Qin Zhengchu have foreseen that Ling Han would suddenly make a move? Moreover, the oppressive aura of Ling Han could practically ignore distance and arrive in an instant. Qin Zhengchu was completely unprepared, and his face instantly turned pale. The barrage of murderous aura was the unique ability of blood transformation tier. Although it didn't cause much damage, it could make one's limbs weak, and even make them lie on the ground. Qin Zhengchu was the son of General Vajra, after all. No matter how disdainful he was, he still had some strength. With the cultivation level of 5th change, there was no way he would be scared into submission by Ling Han's aura. Even so, his whole body was trembling, and no matter what, he did not dare to look into Ling Han's eyes again. You actually know the techniques of the demon race. A cloaked person suddenly spoke up. Young master the trait of a 3rd change blood transformation tier is condensed blood beast, so it's not strange for it to take the form of the demon race, right? Another cloaked person said. His status should be slightly inferior. The first cloaked person shook his head. This is not just an empty image, but also possesses divine power. So it is definitely not just a projection of a demonic monkey, but rather that he has cultivated the corresponding technique. Ling Han was astounded. This person's insight was truly remarkable. He didn't deliberately condense his blood and qi into some kind of beast, but it rather naturally transformed into the form of a demonic monkey. This should be related to the demonic monkey fists that he cultivated. It was a little deeply ingrained in him. Hand over the technique that you are cultivating, the first cloaked person said calmly as he looked at Ling Han. Xianxia Dingua couldn't help but interrupt, saying, "Who do you think you are? You actually dare to make my brother hand over the technique he's cultivating? How dare you?" Aside from young master who, the other cloaked figures all stood up at this moment, pointing angrily at Xianxia Dingua. At first, Qin Zhengchu's face was filled with anger after he had trembled, but now, he revealed a cold smirk. Since these esteemed guests were already on opposing sides with Xianxia Dingua, there was no need for him to interfere. He only had to watch the show. Who had Xianxia Dingua been afraid of? Aside from the few imperial princes that were older, he was not afraid of anyone else. What was there to be afraid of? What is it? Can't I speak? Xianxia Dingua asked calmly as he drank. Xianxia Dingua had calmed down instead. Ignore him. He's just a reckless idiot. Young master who waved his hand. He only stared at Ling Han. The more he recalled the scene just now, the more he felt that the demonic monkey's form was filled with intelligence, and had a kind of viciousness and dominance. It was definitely an extraordinary seed from the ancient times. Yes, young master who... The other cloaked figures all answered solemnly. Young master who didn't say anything else, and merely smiled at Ling Han. There was no need to rush. This person couldn't fly, so how could he run now that he had his eye on him? Qin Zhengchu's side stopped, causing trouble. Xianxia Dingua also felt as if he had punched empty air. He couldn't charge up to fight, right? The people on both sides continued to watch the battle, and for the moment, everything was peaceful. The battle between Ma Jiao and Xianxia soon ended. They were fighting very intensely, and very soon, their blood and qi were boiling, as they carried out the most explosive clash. In the end, it was still Xianxia, the ever-victorious king, that had once again attained victory. TSK. You dare call this kind of trash invincible? A cloaked person scoffed. It can't be helped. The overall strength of the Dark North nation is too weak, so what elites could there be? Another cloaked person said. A bunch of trash. What's the point of negotiating with them? Just send out troops and conquer them, so they can become subjects. A third cloaked person said. When these words fell, everyone in the arena was enraged. Fuck! What the fuck are you people talking about? Ling Han looked towards Xianxia Dingua, and Xianxia Dingua also looked towards him. They all gave an "oh." As it turned out, these cloaked figures were envoys from Yu Empire. It was unknown whether this young master who was that imperial prince. What is it? Are you all still unconvinced? A cloaked person stood up and surveyed the masses. In our Yu Empire, even a 3-year-old child is 100 times stronger than those two trash. Yu Empire? Some people were confused. What kind of force was this? However, some people had heard of it before and couldn't help but become serious. Once this matter became serious, it could possibly become a serious diplomatic matter. Furthermore, Yu Empire's strength should be very terrifying. Just a random imperial prince they sent already had the cultivation level of enlightenment tier. Instantly, a great many people sat down and chose to sit by and watch. Even if the sky collapsed, wasn't there still someone taller holding it up? There was no need for them to stand out. Hurry up and apologize. Kneel down and apologize. You actually dare to boast shamelessly in the imperial capital. Which countryside have you all come from? Those who didn't know the details called out. They were all second-generation young masters, so bullying outsiders was naturally no big deal to them. Xiao, a cloaked figure, leaped out. Pung, pung, pung. Fists and kicks were used at the same time, and figures were sent flying. The second-generation young masters who had previously been shouting were instantly sent flying. Fuck, he actually dared to make a move? Even more people were angered. You outsiders have come to the imperial capital, and actually still dare to commit an act of violence? Bunch of trash. Is there anyone that can fight? The cloaked man swept his gaze around, and finally jumped into the tournament stage. Come. Those who don't like it, come up here and see how Brother Wolf will deal with you guys. Fuck. He's too arrogant. Immediately, someone couldn't bear it any longer, and jumped onto the tournament stage. Pong! However, before he could even steady his footing, he was sent flying with a kick. He crashed heavily into the opposite wall, and actually created a hole in it. Instantly, a large amount of blood seeped out. His whole person was no longer moving, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Fuck! This scared some people, but even more people flew into a thunderous rage. Immediately, some jumped onto the tournament stage again. Pong, he was also immediately sent flying, and fell heavily onto the ground. There were 5 gaping wounds on his chest, as if they had been torn open by sharp claws. Brother Wolf has already said that none of you can fight, the cloaked Brother Wolf said. Haha, Little Wolf is quite mighty. After all, he can be ranked in the top 20 of the younger generation of RU Empire. He alone is enough to sweep aside all other cultivators of the same cultivation level in this weak majestic empire. Quick, quick, quick. Weaklings, is there no one else that can fight? Aside from young master who, the cloaked figures all called out, extremely arrogant. Everyone was furious. Firstly, that Brother Wolf was indeed very strong, and secondly, the prodigies in the imperial capital were unprepared. How many of them here could fight? Hurry up and find someone. That's right. We can't allow them to continue being so arrogant. Do they really think that there is no one capable in our imperial capital? Quite a number of people immediately contacted their friends through the optical computer. Brother Wolf laughed mischievously and said, "Don't you guys have a so-called freak that can suppress the heavens? Hong Tianliang or whatever his name is? Let him come out, and we'll see how Brother Wolf will suppress him. That's Hong Tianbu. Humph. If Hong Tianbu makes a move, you will immediately be blasted into smithereens." Everyone immediately retorted. "Then let him move." Brother Wolf continued to provoke. "Humph. Hong Tianbu is currently exploring an ancient site, so he doesn't have the time to deal with a minor character like you," someone said. "Hey. If he doesn't dare to show himself to fight with Brother Wolf, what's there to say?" Brother Wolf scoffed. "Oh, that's right, there's also a second Hong Tianbu called Ling Han, right? Call him over and see how Brother Wolf beats him until he calls him Grandpa." Shenyuan Dingua couldn't help but look at Ling Han. The main character was here, so he had to be careful not to be immediately beaten. Yet Ling Han was leisurely drinking wine. His anger had already risen, but it had not reached the point of exploding. "Let me fight you." A soft whistle rang out, and a young man had already leaped onto the tournament stage. "I am a 5th change blood transformation tier, so it cannot be considered bullying you. It's Man Hongsheng." Someone immediately recognized him. The prodigy of the Man clan. Though he has been trapped at the end of the 5th change for many years, he has also polished his battle prowess to a powerful extent. If he unleashes his full power, he would not be much inferior to the 1st extreme. Now, we should be able to defeat that arrogant guy. Meanwhile, Brother Wolf stretched out a hand, hooking a finger through his cloak, still incredibly disdainful. "Take this." Man Hongsheng's blood boiled, and he pushed his strength to the extreme. Then he charged towards Brother Wolf. Brother Wolf used his movement technique to dodge. It was clear that there was only a little space in the arena, but he still managed to dodge Man Hongsheng's attacks time and time again. Everyone was stunned. This was so exaggerated. He could dodge a burst of power like this even without boiling blood and chi? However, looking at how Brother Wolf was jumping here and there, why did he really seem like a wolf? However, Man Hongsheng's strength was indeed extraordinary, and added with the fact that his blood and chi was boiling after a few dozen moves, he finally forced Brother Wolf into a corner, leaving Brother Wolf with only 2 options, either confront him head-on or jump off the tournament stage. "Humph! Do you really think that Brother Wolf is afraid of you?" Brother Wolf roared, and an astonishing scene appeared. His body actually enlarged a bit, so much so that his cloak was slightly out of shape. His whole person was exuding a terrifying aura. Pang! He pushed out with both hands, exchanging blows with Man Hongsheng. A victorious smile appeared on Man Hongsheng's face. He was at the peak stage of fifth change, and his blood and chi was also boiling. Just how terrifying was his power now. However, before his smile could fade, his eyes became incredibly shocked, and his whole person was sent flying. He fell heavily onto the ground. His limbs sprawled out widely, no longer able to move. So weak, Brother Wolf cackled, and with a shake of his body, his inflated body actually shrunk back. Ling Han was astonished. Just then, it was clear that Brother Wolf had also gotten a burst of power. Although he hadn't revealed his blood and chi, once his blood and chi boiled, it couldn't be stopped. So why was he able to stop midway? Didn't this mean that he could still explode a second time, 3 times, or even 100 times? Anyone else? Brother Wolf leaped out, 1 foot stepping on Man Hongsheng chest as he swept his gaze over everyone. You're all trash. Not a single one of you can fight.